Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 10th episode of Shot of Nostalgia right here at the Turnbuckle Tavern. I'm good old Mike Belcaster, brother, and joining me as always is the one, the man with the plan. Boom!
Live from the No Sale Studios, it's the Ace of the Tavern, ACEFIELD Retro, and here we are, man. Episode 10, Season 2, one episode left, VCW 1995. It's bittersweet as we kind of get to the end of this journey, but this is what it's all about, man. We finally got to that event that we felt like, I think they're hitting that crescendo, man. November to Remember was quite the event. You and I were texting while watching it. It felt like this was everything, man. It didn't have Malenko, Eddie, and Chris Benoit, but I had everything but that.
Yeah, no, it really, listen, it was the first show we watched where it didn't need them. It really felt so complete. The action, the storytelling, everything was just chef kiss, man. I had a blast watching this this afternoon. It was very, very fresh on the brain, man. So looking forward to going over it.
So as we mentioned, we're going to be reviewing ECW November to Remember 1995, going through all the results of Hardcore TV leading up to the day. Of course, we're going to go through the newsletter. Dave Meltzer's going to help us build some context. And man, we got some crazy stuff going on in the newsletter. I mentioned it on Wrestling Tonight, what you're going to be expecting, but we got everything from Steve Austin being fired from WCW and showing up in ECW. And then also on top of that, we got New Jack being fired. We also got the fire with Terry Funk when he lit a cloth shirt and the first row went on fire, and the Philadelphia Athletic Commission want to get rid of ECW as a whole entity. So much to get into. As you mentioned, we both freshly watched this, and I appreciate the support last week with you guys hanging with me. Belcaster wasn't here. It's so nice to have you back, man. It's not the same without you.
Dude, I still have bruises on my arm. Shoot. It was a very shitty situation, no pun intended, last week, but I'm happy to be back in full force. And what an event to come back to. I mean, last week we couldn't watch WrestlePalooza. We had a bunch of shit going on. I was literally right here in my chair. You posted the post on Instagram of you sitting here with my chair, and unfortunate circumstances came about and I could not make it, but I'm happy to be back in full force right here at the Turnbuckle Tavern, brother.
Well, before just off the top here, let's just pay some tribute to Jay Briscoe, who passed on Tuesday evening. Want to be sure that every show we're giving a little bit of mention here. So rest in peace to Jay Briscoe. And you guys did a great
100%.
job in the wrap-up show last night, paying some homage to it, the flagship as well, talking about Jay Briscoe. And the outpouring of love and support for the man and his family was awesome in the wrestling community. And this is just bigger than wrestling. You can see how far his reach was. And it's, you and I were mentioning off air, it's been one of those things. I'm stuck on social media reading all the great outpouring of love, and it's been amazing to see what he did for everybody in his community in the wrestling world.
100%. And I do want to like just send the praise out. I mean, we wouldn't have had the year here at the tavern that we did without the Briscoes. I mean, covering the fucking GCW show with you and Chad, and I mean, we were blessed to watch these dudes perform on almost a weekly basis, and it wasn't like we were taking it for granted, but like I wish we would have sang their praises even more. They were such a goddamn good tag team, such a good thing to watch in pro wrestling. And I mean, that only wipes off the dust on top of the book, like this guy was a beautiful human being, amazing father, amazing person all around. And it's such a loss to the wrestling community, and just a heartbreaking thing it's so sudden, man, so fucking sudden. And nobody expects bad things to happen, but when they do on such a random occurrence, it makes it even harder, especially after the year they had last year. It's mind-blowing to me, and it sucks. I love the Briscoe brothers. They were a big part of my fandom growing up, and listen, man, we wouldn't be here doing what we're doing without them. So I really, really just want to give Jay and Mark, just the biggest praise in the world. I mean, the GCW show alone did so much because of them, and I mean the tavern itself did so much because of our TikTok is like 90% Briscoe Brothers videos. It's awesome.
Right.
It's the shits, like in a good way, and I love it, man. I'm gonna miss that motherfucker so much.
And the beautiful part about wrestling is, you know, as time goes on, his legacy is going to live on, and people are going to enjoy the matches he put on. And how could you end your life and career with 2 better matches as a tag team, 3 better matches with the trilogy against FTR? It's one of those 3 matches are perfection as far as tag team wrestling, and they're only going to get better over time. So we're going to sit here years from now, and you know, that's how you're going to honor his legacy, and he's going to live on through the memories and throughout wrestling fandoms, and of course in his personal life as well. The outpouring of love was tremendous. Just reading the post from, you know, the one that stood out to me was Sami Zayn, but you can go down the list, Kevin Owens, everyone had a different story. And even from the fans too, the fans' perspective of posting photos and anecdotal stories. And you can even listen to Sneed's story on the flagship about when he took the time to drive down to Kentucky and see the Briscoes wrestle. And then, you know, how nice they were, talking about the Wu-Tangs for the kids shirt. All shows the connection they've had with the fans, the wrestlers, the business, and everyone around them. And they took the time, and man, like, thoughts and prayers go out to the Briscoe family. And, you know, we're going to miss you, Jay. Mark Briscoe, if you decide to wrestle again, we'll be here for you and supporting you in any way we can just to enjoy it. But, you know, we'll see if he gets back in the ring, and that's his choice personally.
100%. And such a shitty timing. I mean, it was Mark's birthday yesterday. Like, it's so hard. It really hit to the heart, man. It was just bad all the way around. I can't, words can't even express how deep the condolences are on behalf of both of us. I mean, you obviously you're a huge Briscoes fan, as we all are, but man, I mean, it fucking hit hard here. I was wrapping up the Fig Night with Tom, and literally 2 seconds off the air, he's like, you know, and I felt the gasp, and he was like, Briscoe died. And I was like, wait, like the old school, it was like Gerald Briscoe, and he's like, no, fucking Jay Briscoe. I was like, God, crazy, damn, dude, like absolutely crazy, way too young, way too soon. You know, the blessing in disguise is at least he was with his family, at least he was with his daughters. Like, there's, you know, you got to find the light somewhere, right? And I mean, God, I couldn't picture a happier place to be than with my family, you know, and it sucks. It's just heartbreaking, man.
I mean, there's no easy way to transition into the show, so I just want to kind of, you know, open up with that. And you and I haven't been on the air since it happened, so
yeah,
we'll continue to talk about it and pass on the legacy, because as we're all huge fans of what the Briscoes did in the ring, and Jay and Mark, everything they brought to Ring of Honor, what they were bringing to Ring of Honor, and what they could have continued when the TV deal started. So we will continue to let his legacy live through us watching wrestling. But, you know, no easy way to transition, but let's get into happy hour and talk about 1995 from September. Dave Meltzer dropping some facts for us.
Dusty, always the mood bringer of mood bringer.
there's no easy transition for that bumper, and then it just has to put a nice bookmark into our conversation. But last week we covered so much ground, and we went from like July until September, so much to cover. We're here now, September to November, throughout the newsletter, a lot going on, and it feels like this newsletter that we broke down for this episode is more meaty than ever. As I mentioned in the intro with the Stone Cold stuff, we're going to get deep into that, talking about Meltzer's projection about where he'd go and what he thinks about Steve Austin is very fascinating. But let's start with the September 18th, 1995 newsletter. Not much in this one. They mostly talk about Meltzer being on the September 16th ECW Arena show. They have planned 2 Cold Scorpio and a mystery team problem eliminators with a new gimmick versus Steiners and Taz. On the 9/23 Middletown, New York, they have Sandman versus Whipwreck for the ECW title, Public Enemy and the Gangsters in a Falls Count Anywhere match with both Bill Alfonso and 911 as referees, Cactus Jack versus Hack Myers, Raven and Richards defending against the Steiners, and Scorpio and Dreamer for the TV title. So not much going on in the September newsletter. just breaking down the upcoming cards, which was huge at the time because that's how people got their information when they would go to the shows. It wasn't posted on Instagram. You couldn't find the cards like we do now. They had to research it some other way, and this is with passing the information on. So as meaningless as it seems to us for this, I wanted to include it because cards subject to change, but a lot of times it stayed the same.
Yeah. Can you imagine if you were like a young fan and your first time seeing Cactus Jack was against Hack Myers?
You mean Shaw Hack Myers. That's what you mean.
Yeah.
But let's get into the September 25th, 1995 newsletter. And this is a big, meaty part of what I want to talk about. This is when Steve Austin was fired. So this is Meltzer talking about it. WCW did fire Steve Austin on 9/15. Austin, 30 years old, was considered for years as perhaps the best young wrestler in the U.S. His career languished for the past year, almost to the point that he was spoken of like his former tag team partner, Brian Pillman, as a wrestler who had made a lot of money by signing good contracts, but had great careers ruined by a WCW organization that had been both unwilling and unable to get any wrestlers over. So before I move into what the issues were in WCW, according to Meltzer, do you have any memories of Steve Austin over in WCW when you were watching about, seeing that potential in him?
I not really, and not a slight against Austin. I was just a baby. Like I had no idea what was going on, but obviously you could tell, especially in tonight's event, the charisma, the attitude. The guy who was a presence, man, and I love every bit of it. Even last week's when I wasn't here, I want to speak about it a little bit, but just that backstage segment, it stole the show. Like, wait a minute, you're Steve Austin. Like, he's sitting there. Let me tell you something, Mean Joey, brother. Like, he's full blown in such a great space. The guy was charismatic. He was entertaining. He was just a huge presence no matter what he was doing. Even on tonight's show, it just goes miles beyond, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But goddamn, Stone Cold Steve Austin, stunning Steve Austin. You feel the love, you feel I gotta do this, kid. We're going out there, we're gonna do a 20-minute Broadway, mean Joey, brother.
It's fantastic, man. And Meltzer continues about the issues in WCW, and there were a few, but he says Austin's main problem appeared to be the cliquish nature of WCW, which is not consistent not only in wrestling but in most jobs, but worse in WCW than most places. Obviously, he didn't hang with the right crowd. When the Hogan camp got into power, they dismissed Austin as a highly paid wrestler who was a good worker with no charisma. And in their view of wrestling, work rate meant next to nothing. The Hogan clique basically consisted of WWFers from the mid-'80s when wrestling was hot, and thus could dismiss any wrestler who came along later as being unable to draw money. So he also said he wasn't in the Flair clique either, so nobody spoke up for his work rate on the inside at meetings. Austin was given little chance to show his stuff after the career-ending back injury of his main opponent, Ricky Steamboat. Austin then suffered a knee injury which kept him out a few months, and before he was plugged into a new planned program, a reuniting of his tag team with Brian Pillman, and he went to Japan and suffered a tricep tear. So it sounds like injuries, relationship issues, he's not hanging with the right people, and then obviously politics in the back. He's not close with the Hogan guys. He's not close enough with the Ric Flair guys to get vouched for, so thus he gets forgotten about and goes by the wayside, and nobody can tap into his potential. It sounds like they knew, because everyone talks about how Stone Cold was, or Steve Austin in general in WCW, that they didn't know what they had. I think they did. They signed him to a big contract. I just think that personalities and booking decisions got in the way of not pushing young talent. I think that was the issue.
100%. And timing too. I mean, this was a different age. I mean, 95, you're talking trying to see potential in such a young guy, 30 years old, long blonde hair, kind of looking the part as most of the roster did at the time. Yeah, man, Austin was just a breath of fresh air, and I don't think a lot of people noticed it until this ECW stint, and then further on, look at the career the guy had. I mean, he just came back and basically headlined WrestleMania last year. It was unbelievable. So one of the biggest names in wrestling ever, if not the biggest name.
So we talked about that tricep tear. It happened on a tour of New Japan in June. And this is sort of the critique of WCW. He was fired while he was injured, rehabbing that. So obviously WCW has to be painted in a certain light. And of course, Austin in those promos and the promo you mentioned last week, they certainly mentioned that as far as that was his fuel to the fire, ripping on WCW. And it's continued here about his plans in ECW. And Meltzer's not sure what he's going to be able to do once he's returning to the ring. But he assumes he's going to be able to have a strong spot with ECW if he would want it, since he's a longtime friend of Paul Heyman, although that would entail a major come down in money. Meltzer says, I don't know if he has any connections or made any in All Japan, but if he wants to make a career out of Japan, that promotion and him almost seem tailor-made if he learns style and psychology. All Japan needs new foreign stars they can push, and very few Americans have the ability to make with that group, and Austin potentially fits in. Of course, WWF is the most logical option. He probably could also return to WCW if he was willing to work for less money in a per-night deal, although I'm betting the nature of his dismissal, which is almost certainly result in very bitter feelings, will make that very difficult. Now it's on both sides, because now Austin's on ECW television ripping on Hogan, which is not going to go over well. He's ripping on all the old faces in WCW. He's burning some bridges here. I mean, it's the right decision. We see now with hindsight that he made the right decision, but that was a tough one to make, because if you burn that bridge in WCW, there's no other place to go back, especially when there's really only 3 shows in town and 2 paying you most money, and WWF is your only option now. So either get over there or that's it for you.
Yeah, I feel like ECW was a good breath of fresh air for him. It really reignited the flame behind his character. It made him a little bit more on his own, not relying on a company to put him over. It was pure Stone Cold before Stone Cold was invented, and yeah, like I said, this week we see such a beautiful presence on him. I'm so happy we get to cover it.
So before we move back into Steve Austin, who's covered extensively in the October 2nd newsletter, finishing up this newsletter at the end of September, according to Heyman, Richard Freeberg, who handled the merchandise and global distributions, has been removed from the company, and to expect legal action stemming from it because they are behind paying ECW their share of merchandise. Heyman is coming out with his own ECW merchandise this week. If you remember, I think it was 2 weeks ago, you and I sat here reading letters from people that were coming after Heyman, potentially about the merchandise deal, about the issues with the DVD distribution. Friedberg was someone who wrote in and talked about the relationship he had with Paul Heyman, or lack thereof, when they started. And he talked about how Heyman screwed him out of money, that they weren't paying him. And then eventually they found a different way to make the t-shirts cheaper and then cut Richard Freeberg out altogether. It's a game of who's who at this point. I mean, at this point, we don't know who's right, who's wrong. People are going to tell their side of the story in business dealings, but there's a lot of issues behind the scenes with Paul Heyman. I think when you're at the head of this kind of company trying to cut corners to make sure you're able to run the shows, there's gonna be a lot of people that you rub the wrong way.
Of course. Yeah. He's a bridge burner, obviously.
So moving here, Scott Steiner no-showed the 9/15 show in Jim Thorpe because he had been booked in Cordell, Georgia. So his TV title match with Scorpio wound up being with Whipwreck as a sub. Refunds were offered to everybody in the arena. Nobody asked for them. So that was a good thing. And then, of course, to end the September newsletter, ECW will be on at 1 a.m. Sundays every week on MSG Cable through the end of October. That's a spot we're all familiar with. They're just trying to get TV wherever they can. 1 a.m. doesn't matter. 2 a.m., 3 a.m. That's ECW, baby.
Yeah, that's right up my alley. That was public access here in Chicago. 2 o'clock in the morning, you hear the music, everything you'd perk up. You'd be like, all right, I'm awake, and maybe fall asleep a couple minutes into it because you're a kid and exhausted.
All right, so let's go to the October 2nd, 1995 newsletter, and this is fresh off of when Steve Austin first appeared on ECW television, and Meltzer reviewed it. He had said, Steve Austin appeared on the 9/23 ECW house show in Middletown, New York, and will make his first appearance on TV this coming week. Austin, who will be billed as the Extreme Superstar, a combination spoof on WWF calling all its wrestlers superstars, and perhaps as a modern-day Billy Graham, is no doubt going to be pushed as ECW World Champion as soon as they can viably get the belt on him. At this point, there are no serious negotiations that I know between Austin and All Japan, which enable Austin to remain long-term with ECW and still make a major league living at wrestling. Obviously, his long-term tenure in ECW will be based whether or not either the group improves itself to the point he can make a competitive living with it, or he can use ECW as a supplement to a regular Japan gig. So I think Meltzer kind of sees that he could be the face of ECW, especially when they need stars. You got everybody leaving. That doesn't happen. They never quite put the belt on him. He is involved in the main event feud, especially he's wrestling Whipwreck in the main event of November to Remember. But I think he would have been world champion if he would have stuck around, obviously.
100%. That goes without saying,
So in his first television interview, we talked about before, Austin mocked Hogan by calling himself the Stevester, and that Steve-O-Mania was running wild and said it was unfortunate that he wasn't a good enough wrestler to get past the mid-card in WCW. We'll talk in a little bit. I think in a couple of newsletters, they talk about Hogan's reaction to that in the back of WCW. And should be interesting to see how they react. But yeah, I mean, the Austin thing, we've seen gimmicks or I guess stints involved in promotions that people are mocking other wrestlers. It feels so out of character for Steve Austin, but I think, as you mentioned before, it really showed that charisma that we didn't see anywhere else, and it was almost like he was turning it up to 11, because that was the criticism on him. He doesn't have personality, and this showed plenty of it in just a small segment.
Yeah, no, it was wild to see. I mean, even watching it as a kid, but like watching it back, like you see a side of Steve Austin you never seen in WCW here. I mean, he comes out full blown, full guns blaring, like, brother, let me tell you something. Me and Joey, I ain't got what it takes to be the guy in WCW. And I love the attitude, like the whole thing was perfect. And Stone Cold he had more charisma in his pinky than I probably do in my entire body.
So talking about Cactus Jack, he started his new gimmick of turning on hardcore fans. He wrestled the entire match pretty much scientifically, not doing any of his normal maneuvers. He teased punching and using chairs and then throwed the blows and would tell fans they don't deserve to see blood. Later in the show, when Scorpio was defending the TV title against Dreamer, Cactus Jack DDT Dreamer to set up Scorpio's win. So Sandman and Whipwreck turned their match into a ladder match, and Sandman climbed the ladder to the ceiling, did a leg drop hanging from the ceiling, and Whipwreck did a Frankensteiner off the ladder. This was in Middletown, New York, that Steve Austin debut house show. What are your thoughts on this Cactus Jack anti-hardcore gimmick? It seems like probably from the genius of Foley's mind of like, I want to break the mold of what everybody thinks I am. This is how I can get heat.
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved it. I'm one of the biggest Foley marks that you could possibly get. I've read all of his books, so I've lived his journey with him. It's been great, but this was a very, very peak Mick Foley. This was so good. Listen, guys, I'm here to do what I want to do the best way. I'm a technical wrestler, and he really broke the mold from how Mick Foley was perceived on screen. So yeah, kudos to Mick for fucking pulling that off. He did a great job with it.
So La Parka may debut on the October 28th show, and then Meltzer's not really sure if that's happening, but La Parka feels right in tune with the relationship with AAA that's budding, Psychosis, Rey Mysterio, Conan, all these guys that are on the card. This is their attempt to replace the guys that left. Obviously, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, and Chris Benoit are now gone in WCW. La Parka, Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, those guys are coming over here to replace them. And WCW steals these guys as well. Like, these are all faces that eventually wind up back in Atlanta with Eric Bischoff. But it's just like, it's a net ending trying to fill that cup while there's a hole in the bottom of it. And it keeps dripping out. And Heyman's trying to fill it up with some good shit, though. But it can't stay in the goddamn cup.
Yeah, no, but listen, for what he did, when it was filled, it was great.
There were no charges or police charges against Mustafa stemming from his conduct, where the police hauled him out of the Philadelphia Travel Lodge, and he was back in action over the weekend. First of two instances where the gangsters have some legal issues. We'll get into that for sure. But I mean, they were staying in Philadelphia. I'm sure there were things that we didn't even hear that the police didn't get called for about, not just with Mustafa and them, but these guys were staying there for weeks at a time, and wrestlers drinking, partying, and all that stuff. These personalities that we now know. I'm sure there was a lot more going on in that Philadelphia Travel Lodge.
Oh, I guarantee you.
So they're scheduling monthly shows at the Casino Magic Bay in St. Louis, Missouri, starting on 11/9, and looking to do monthly stops there, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So this is sort of what we were talking about first couple episodes about the travel and the aspirations that Paul Heyman has for growth. But again, too much too soon. You're like losing talent. You can't keep people there. Checks are bouncing. You don't have a merchandise guy. Your DVD distribution's all messed up, but you're trying to go to St. Louis. And I don't know. It feels like, all right, can we just kind of get everything streamlined and figure out what we're doing before we start traveling to Baton Rouge and getting guys hotels and flights and paying them? I don't know. It seems like you have a good thing in Philly. Go over to Jim Thorpe, maybe go to New York, do the drive. But when you're trying to expand past that point, it's just that feels like the precursor to why they fizzled out, among many things.
Easily, absolutely easily. I mean, it's hard enough running a business, but when shit starts going awry and like you can't nail it down, you don't have a merch guy, your DVD distribution's all fucked up, VHS distribution is all over the place. Yeah, it totally on the money. It was
I said
the
DVD, by the way, 95.
It's okay. It's listen, we're custom HD DVD. Remember those things? Those lasted a
Exactly.
week. Yeah, but Paul was just trying to keep things moving, I guess. And even though things were falling all apart all over the place, he was still pedal to the metal, and you got to give him credit for that.
So the Rey Mysterio Jr. versus Psychosis match aired on 9/26 television show, and besides the match itself being great, Meltzer gives Joey Styles a huge kudos here again. He said he did one hell of a job commentary. I'd say the presentation and hype of new wrestlers of this match, as opposed to the job WCW has done in introducing new wrestlers who can really wrestle, has been about 180-degree difference. Meltzer gave this match 4.25 stars. Rey Mysterio and Psychosis feels like they can't ever have a bad match. Anytime these guys lock up, they seem like they're perfect for each other. And that maybe it's just Rey Mysterio and Psychosis being great wrestlers. So this match itself is really, really good. The match that they had at November to Remember was even better, in my opinion. But this was the perfect answer to Eddie Guerrero and that crew leaving, because they're so exciting. And like, this type of style wasn't being seen in the US. Like, this was common Lucha Libre and AAA, CMLL, but I just think it blew people away. And when it eventually got to WCW, that's the casual audience capturing what Lucha Libre was. It blew them away. And mixing that with the style of American wrestling, it just was the perfect mix. And man, Rey and Psychosis were perfect in ECW at this point.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, even when we were covering WCW, you really caught how big of a breath of fresh air they were when we were watching. We would get through these really bad openers, like The Thing versus Scott Steiner or whatever, but you'd get a Psychosis Rey Mysterio match and you'd be like, thank God, like, we really this okay, this is worth watching.
So we finally see Sabu back into the newsletter, and we'll see Sabu returning eventually, but Meltzer's not so confident here on October 9th. He says, don't expect to see Sabu back after all. Sabu is working the October 28th for Dennis Coraluzzo in Woodbury, New Jersey, which is the same date as an ECW arena show, and Paul Heyman is pretty adamant if Sabu works against him that he's not going to bring him back ever, figuring that the way things are going for each, Sabu needs him more than he needs Sabu. Incidentally, WCW has sent Sabu a contract, but he hasn't signed it yet. So going back and forth, I mean, you can compare this to common day issues we see in the ring. You know, we can get into the CM Punk stuff, but I think the biggest thing is time heals all. Enough time passes where people can put their differences aside. And no matter what Paul Heyman said in front of a crowd and what Sabu did to him, when there's money to be made and you guys can put your differences aside and do business, I think eventually that rises to the top and you can look past any issues you had. And we do eventually see them look past the issues, because Sabu does work that show. Paul Heyman does go back on his word and says, I won't bring him back, but he does. And Sabu, I think he's just so valuable. And like, for Sabu to come back and be welcomed with open arms by the ECW audience after, in Paul Heyman's perspective of how he perceived it as abandoning the audience, it just shows how talented Sabu was to get them to feel a certain way of things he was doing. Because he sacrificed his body truly for the company.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you watch Sabu, it is art. We could go on, praise everybody in the world. Sabu is somebody that needs that praise, deserves that praise. He's earned it. I loved even in the match coming up, like, it was just so damn good. I'd never seen a good Hack Myers match. Fuck, this is the time I did.
Right. So we talk about Terry Funk a lot and his retirement and unretirement. His plans right now are not to wrestle, with the exception of doing 1 week for IWA in Japan for the rest of the year so he can rest up. At the age of 51, he is talking about being the time to finally give it up. He's got a movie role lined up in early 96, so if he does wrestle in the U.S., it won't be till later that year. Both ECW and AAA are interested in working, but don't expect anything, at least in the ring, for the rest of the year, which is just like categorically false. And that's not that's not damnation on Meltzer's reporting skills. It's just Terry Funk never could retire. He's one of those guys, similar to Ric Flair. He just couldn't shake it. As long as he can go, he would go.
Yeah, no, we were watching the main event this afternoon, and I was like, I showed the wife. I was like, Terry Funk, this is 1995. in 21 years he wrestles at ECW One Night Stand. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's fucking wild.
And taught himself the moonsault too, because like he's like he need to figure out something different to do to stay over in this time of day. And at whatever years old, 50 something years old, he was teaching himself the moonsault and doing it on top of barbed wire and chairs. The guy's amazing.
Insane. Legend. Absolute legend.
So the final note here in the October 9th, 1995 newsletter is Meltzer saying there are more people upset than you think about the Steve Austin interview on ECW show last week where he mocked Hogan. That's all he wrote. Kind of all telling about the egos in WCW and why Austin wanted to leave in the first place and was unhappy there. So, you know, like we said, though, you could burn bridges and still come back. Like, I think even though we're talking about potentially, he did go to WWF, as we know. But I think if WCW saw Austin as an opportunity to make money, Hogan would want to work with him. Now that he's a star, like, I think everyone would put that aside.
Dude, the calamity going around for Austin when he did finally burst that bubble and became a huge star. I mean, WCW introduced Goldberg as a counteraction. Like that's how much they wanted Steve Austin as one of their guys. And that just shows the ability of how good Stone Cold was, man.
So let's get into the other interesting part here. There's 3 interesting parts of this newsletter, and we're going to go long about this, but it's worth it. October 16th, 1995, Jerome Young, better known as New Jack of the Gangsters, had yet another altercation, this time in the dressing room at the ECW show on 10/6 in the Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania show. According to the reports Meltzer and the Wrestling Observer received, the Gangsters had a match against the Dudley brothers, the two being the Dudley, Jeff Bradley of Florida, and Dancing with Dudley, D.W. Dudley, real name Adolfo Bermudez, doing an Indian gimmick who formerly worked IWCCW as part of a tag team called the Sioux War Party. As we were told, the story during the match, D.W. Dudley suffered a broken nose and was working stiff on the comeback with New Jack. New Jack told him it was a work and to lighten up. After the match was over, the Gangsters who won left the ring first, with the Dudleys selling the loss in the ring. Now, following this, D.W. Dudley came to the back. He was allegedly hit from behind as he came through the door by New Jack with a nightstick, and his head was badly split open, needing a dozen stitches. But he actually wasn't knocked down, although he was clearly stunned on his feet. D.W. Dudley actually tackled New Jack while the rest of the dressing room tried to break it up. Before it was over, New Jack basically challenged half the dressing room to fight, with his partner Mustafa telling guys not to mess with him because he's sneaky and you don't know what he'll do. During the brawl, it appeared that New Jack was trying to shove D.W. Dudley through a plate glass window, which overlooks a 30-foot drop. Mikey Whipwreck, who was caught in the middle of things as people were trying to break it up, had his head shoved through a window and got a bad cut in the back of his head, but he was able to work that night. The ones who came closest to get into a fight with New Jack while attempting to break it up were, of course, Taz, Pitbull number 2, Conan. Taz and New Jack allegedly exchanged words, with New Jack calling Taz, who was a legit tough guy with strong wrestling and judo background, but is physically in bad shape right now due to a neck injury, a kiss ass, and Taz responding in kind, but the guys in the dressing room kept things from getting out of control a second time. Man, all over the place. This is a lot going on, a lot of personalities back there. We knew this about New Jack. You hear the stories, and like now people, we watch that Dark Side of the Ring with New Jack, and of course things don't get better. Like we have other issues that we see where he pretty much went out of his way to hurt people legitimately in the ring that he didn't like, and that's from his own mouth. You guys can watch the interviews and have him have him tell you about it. You know, New Jack is gone now, but these are the stories that live on as far as the lore of ECW. And I think at the time, people were like, oh, it's ECW being ECW. But I think this is bad for the locker room, obviously. And it's bad for morale. And it's with wrestling, when you have a guy who has that lack of control, it just puts you in a bad position, because really wrestling's about trust. And if you can't trust these guys in the ring, what else do you have, man? This is a very, very troubling situation. And we'll see how they handle it. I do know I read ahead in the newsletter, but Paul Heyman was in a tough spot here because the Gangsters were prominently booked. Yeah, no, listen, it's a hard thing to do. And that's why we don't see Dances with Dudley too much for the rest of the year. This is a fast stop on his break. But listen, New Jack was crazy. There's nothing you could take away from that.
he was New Jack, man. Nobody will ever replace New Jack. Motherfucker was New Jack.
So after everything was finally broken up, New Jack, who has developed quite a track record in his short wrestling career, according to Meltzer, apologized to everyone for what happened. Yo, my bad. The general mood of the wrestlers, from what we heard, was that they wanted him gone, but Paul Heyman said they didn't want to screw up the show the next night, which was already going to have a problem because they advertised the gimmick of a street fight outside the building on the street. That wasn't going to take place. Whether they would work the next night was a debated issue, but ultimately it was decided they should work the show because it would be the best thing for the company. The licensing and inspections department of the city government the day before the show had informed ECW they didn't have the correct permits to run the planned match outdoors underneath the trestle after the conclusion of the arena show. Plus, there were complaints by those living in the neighborhood by loud noises. So they decided to have money kind of rule over this. And I'm sure people in the locker room were upset that New Jack decided to work. We'll see what happens. You and I both do know what happens. But what do you think? Like, if you're Paul Heyman here, what's the decision you make? Do you have him wrestle the next night, or do you just fire him on the spot?
Man, it's a tough one because New Jack, obviously, we know New Jack, for what he was a draw. He was a spectacle, man. Nobody was willing to put their life on the line like he did. This guy and other people's lives on the line like he did. It was one of those things. Like, we've seen him jump off of balconies. We've seen him jump off of scaffolds, throw people off scaffold. Like, New Jack was just a very huge character, and that is a tough spot. Like, do you get rid of one of your number one spectacles, and a guy that really will draw because people want to come see him do crazy shit because you never know what you're going to get. I think it was all unfair for Paul to keep him on the card and try to book the next show.
So at the beginning of this show, Heyman came out, said that everyone knew that him being there was bad news. At this point, a chant of SABU began, reportedly not a knock on Heyman, but just because the situation reminded everyone of the famous SABU speech. Paul Heyman continued. It said SABU was welcome back, but instead on the 28th, he was wrestling for the opposition, which we all know is the Dennis Coralluso show in Woodbury, New Jersey, right down the street, because he was mad that Raven, Steve Richards, and the Pitbulls broke so many tables in their match on the previous show. He then explained the match outdoors would have to be canceled, saying it was complaints by the local neighborhood, but they'd have a three-way dance part 2 for the tag titles with Public Enemy, the Gangsters, and whoever wins the title match earlier with Raven and Richards against the Pitbulls to end the card. With the belts at stake to make up for it, it wound up being with the tag titles changing hands twice in the same show. And we're going to get into the results there. But this is another example of Paul Heyman with the transparency in front of the crowd. Instead of just going ahead with the crowd and not telling them what happened and acting like this was always the plan, he was honest with them about they didn't have the right permits. They couldn't run that street fight outside. So they have made the best decision. I think fans really appreciated the honesty from him. And I think that went a long way.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of his best qualities was the honesty. It paid off in many, many things. Like, we see Sabu return. I mean, Paul might have been, fuck Sabu, we don't want him around here. But like, when it happens, it just paints a beautiful picture on everything. It's great.
So crazy enough, the Gangsters do have an opportunity to speak in the ring after their match. And New Jack cut a promo on Cornette, WWF, and WCW in the ring before the match. He said the WWF is afraid of them because they'd run by a racist, reference to Bill Watts since he made comments in the past. So people can assume it's Bill Watts, not Vince. He's talking about it, but people go back and forth about who he was talking about. He said that WCW is afraid of the Gangsters and won't even let them improve their craft by letting them train at the power plant. In regard to Cornette, he said words to the effect that Cornette had better not say what he's been saying about him to his face, or he'll tell the world about Cornette, and that he called him some fairly vulgar names. Considering his at best tenuous position with ECW after the action of the previous night, his timing on running down basically anyone who might possibly give him a regular job was particularly curious. So at this time, Meltzer hasn't received word one way or the other about the future status of the Gangsters with ECW, other than that many believe it was their last show, and they aren't at this point advertised for the October 28th show. So New Jack has nowhere else to go. We do know he eventually goes back to Smoky Mountain Wrestling. He'll go back to ECW after, but it's so interesting that he chooses that time to bury everybody else when he knows he's leaving ECW. It just shows like you really can't predict what this guy's going to do.
No, he was a wild card, man.
So moving down here, we had Cactus Jack did another one of the best interviews in the history of pro wrestling on the 10-3 television show. This is according to Meltzer. We also have some money issues as well popping up. Several checks from the house show 922 in Middletown, New York bounced. Paul Heyman said that his car was broken into and his briefcase had his checkbook and records was stolen. So he had to close the account, but tried to contact everyone and send new checks out. And most guys were contacted before the weekend. So, I mean, if anyone's ever owed you money and they make excuses, it sounds like they have the most extravagant excuses. Maybe it's true. Maybe his car was broken into. Maybe someone stole his checkbook, but maybe, just maybe, Paul Heyman didn't have the money to pay you.
The 90s were wild, man. You can get away with shit like that.
Exactly. Well, that's a good point. I mean, if you didn't have the access to the cash because your bank account was hacked or something, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, now Gringo Loco would be like, pull up the fucking footage. Let me see the security footage. I know they have security footage.
100%. All right, so now it appears that Steve Austin is gathering interest in his short stint with ECW. He got the attention of WWF. What appears to be the situation with Austin is he was scheduled for a meeting on 10/10 with Vince McMahon. He's already got talks scheduled with All Japan. If he works out a deal there, the odds are great he'll work there and be world champion and pushes the star of the promotion. If not, it's inevitable just from a money standpoint and the fact that WWF badly needs heels who can work and young stars. And right now there isn't a long list of people who can fill that bill, that he'll end up in WWF. So Meltzer nailed it right on. I don't think he's saying he's be world champion in All Japan. You could be taking that he's saying he'll be world champion in WWF, but either way, he predicts that WWF needs Steve Austin badly. And it's a shoo-in to have this guy work as a heel coming in that can work strong and help the young guys get over. It's the perfect fit. And Austin eventually finds his own niche and bypasses all the young stars they were trying to push by giving him the rub. And all of a sudden, Austin's the star you're building around.
Yeah. Could you imagine how things would have panned out if All Japan was the one that booked Stone Cold Steve Austin? Like, it's crazy. And I don't know. I don't think it would have ever been as huge of an impact on the business as it was without WWF, right?
No way. I just think Austin, it was the perfect storm. He was the perfect guy at that time. And I love that we're going to be talking about WWF 98 after this season, because I think they go hand in hand. And you can always talk about WrestleMania 1. Who was the guy who made it? Was it Hogan or Vince? Is always the conversation. But I don't think it could have happened with anyone else in either position. It needed to be both those guys in that place. Same thing with the Attitude Era. You needed Vince. You needed the booking of Vince Russo, reality-based programming, and Steve Austin. He was the right guy at the right time.
Yeah, no, 1,000%.
So we finally have Guerrero and Malenko in WCW, and we had their first match aired on the 10/7 Saturday night show. Meltzer gave it a 4-star match, but this is what he said about it. The announcing largely killed it. Tony Schiavone called the frog splash a jackknife once again and called the gory special a torture rack. He and Dusty Rhodes tried to get the two over as young stars trying to make a name, which is another way of giving them the kiss of death. The difference between ECW and WCW is this. In ECW, Paul Heyman's idea was to use Guerrero and Malenko as a modern-day version of Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk, which was the biggest scientific main event feud that drew big money around the country for years in the early 70s. He obviously didn't quite get them to that level, but he didn't exactly have a lot of time either. But that was the plan. In WCW, they were booking them as the modern-day version of Les Thornton and Tony Charles, who were two good technical wrestlers from England who worked open and second matches against each other during the same time frame, but never pushed a series headliners. In fact, to show just how apropos the latter analogy was, they even gave Malenko Thornton's old handle as the man of 1,000 holds.
Wow.
So this just brought me back to a guy like William Regal. Like, I think of his spot in the card. Like, he would go out there and have a great match with Fit Finlay and be like, holy shit, these guys kill it. But you just knew they were never going to be booked in a main slot. It was always just get get that out of your system, go and wrestle, do your thing, so we can like check a box and say we had enough wrestling on the show. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, it's weird too, because like you would think, especially in the 90s, like I would assume half of these guys would make it to the main event eventually, because of how talented they were. Talent goes beyond any program, right? Like we did 96 WCW and we seen what stood out, and it was the Dean Malenkos, the Eddie Guerreros, the Psychoses, the Rey Mysterios. It wasn't so much the Hogans and stuff. Sure, the Hogans were playing a big part of everything, but you wouldn't have that without these guys really building that undercard, because you would tune out. If I was watching that on TV and there wasn't an Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio match, I would not be watching it all the way through. I'd be like, fuck it, let's see what's on the other channel.
100%. And moving on to the October 23rd, 1995 newsletter, we got official word. The Gangsters were fired over the incident in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania last week. On the TV show last week, Taz had an interview talking about Luthez being his childhood hero. Taz's neck is still banged up here, so they're trying to get him on TV with promos. And what was supposed to be a 6-week injury sort of stretched out further. They're having him wrestle, but he's being hidden in these tag matches, sitting on the apron for a bit. I don't know. This neck injury seems to be the one that kind of hinders the rest of his career. Eventually, when he gets to WWF, he's not quite 100%.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was a big downfall to Taz's career because he was such a talented human. I've never seen anybody to this day suplex like Taz suplexes, and that's when he's hurt. That's with this neck injury. It's crazy to think if this wasn't there, how big of a star Taz possibly could have been. Not behind the commentary mic, not, imagine him winning that Royal Rumble when, all that shit. There was so much future there for him. I could have pictured Taz going on and doing great things.
So we had Paul Heyman giving more explanation about the bounce checks from Middletown, New York. At least some of the wrestlers are even more concerned about the future of the company, since many had been calling both WWF and WCW looking for work. So this company lasts for a little bit longer, guys. So hang on. You got a couple more years of paychecks, but people are worried. Like when you have money start bouncing and you're not being paid consistently for putting your body on the line and you can't feed your family, people are going to start looking elsewhere. And that's not a good thing. A pat on the back and a hot dog and a handshake and telling you how much he loves you guys and what you're doing for ECW goes a long way. But at the end of the day, you need to get paid. And if you're not getting paid, you don't want to be there.
100%, man. You got to pay the bills. You got to take care of your fucking life, man.
All right. So we have some letters here from the newsletter, and I feel like it's good to give some perspective of the fans at the time. Obviously, this is from Scott Druyan from Bronxville, New York. After reading the comments of Paul Heyman, Rob Feinstein, and Jason Patasio regarding their working relationship, I felt it appropriate to give a fan's point of view. I've been a fan of ECW from its inception, I have never regretted that or any tape dealings I've had with Feinstein or ECW. I've always been happy with both the tape quality and the timeliness it took to receive the tapes. The only flaw I recall is the tapes ordered directly from ECW that took too long, and the impression they give you is immediate delivery, which is deceiving when the tapes often take a couple months to produce. He continues to kind of put the company over about how much it is. And so this is a perspective of a fan here. We talk about all the issues everybody has, but this is from the consumer point, and he seems quite happy with what he's getting from all these guys.
No, listen, there was no on-demand. Getting a pay-per-view or a show a few months after, it was the regular back then. You'd be lucky. I remember I think it was Halloween Havoc 98, the pay-per-view feed cut off during the main event, and it took whatever cable company I was subscribed to at the time to send me VHSs maybe like 3 months after the event, and I finally get to watch the main event when it came. But still, that's a big company like WCW. We're talking years removed from here. Same shit, different story.
So moving on to the October 30th, 95 newsletter, Meltzer talked about the Rey Mysterio Jr. versus Psychosis 2 out of 3 Falls match that aired on 10/17's TV show. He said he gave it 4 3/4 stars, so a little bit better than the last match we talked about. He said it was a better match for Philadelphia than the Mexico City or Tijuana matches would have been. However, the Mexico City and Tijuana matches were better matches for their city. Mexico City was technically the best match of the 3 as far as wrestling and psychology. Tijuana was the most amazing performance because they were wrestling in a damp ring that everyone else on the card couldn't keep their footing in, and they were doing all their moves and didn't miss a spot. Plus, they had one incredible dive after another and had the best finish and the biggest pop at the end. He continues, Philly had great dives and more brawling, but no mat wrestling and less psychology, but the fans there want constant action, so they adjusted their style for the audience. Philly also had the advantage of having Joey Styles call the match. He's able to get wrestlers with a different style over in one match, something WCW can't do with wrestlers every bit as good if they put them on TV every week for a year. So a couple things here. This is sort of insight into how Meltzer himself looks at matches in context and puts all of it into one picture. It's not just about the quality of match. It's about where it takes place, the conditions, everything that goes into it. And I think a lot of people have issues with his rating system, but again, it's subjective to him, right? Like it's his perspective. So whether you take that with a grain of salt or you take it as gospel, doesn't matter. It's his perspective. But I thought he quantified something that it's really hard to put into words about these things. I mean, that match you talked about with the wet mat, that has to be considered in sort of your rating system, because Look at Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom. If you had that match in a Dynamite, I don't feel like it would have the same impact because it's on a bigger stage. Same thing with WrestleMania.
Yeah.
If you're on a bigger stage and you perform, I feel like the match gets added points to it.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have we seen The Undertaker wrestle on a Raw or SmackDown or whatever it may be? It never has the feel of the WrestleMania match. Nothing will have that lore. Nothing lives up to it. And it's the same thing here. You have to take in circumstance everything, for the full picture. You got to take advantage of how the ring is, how the crowd is, what they're doing, how they adjust to the New Jersey crowd, the New York crowd. It's all important shit to go over. And I think there's due diligence there. Goddamn.
So going to the November 6th, 95 newsletter, and this is the third big event that happened here. And Meltzer says a combination of a fire, the lights going out, and fire extinguishers being sprayed led to a panic at the end of the 10/28 ECW show in Philly. So before we get into it, do you remember this incident with Terry Funk burning T-shirt and all this stuff?
No, not at all. Funk and fire go together like peanut butter and jelly. So I don't not expect it, but I mean, yeah, no recollection of this whatsoever.
So, I mean, it just became commonplace, as you mentioned, but in 95, this was a really big deal and probably could have closed the doors for good for ECW. But Meltzer says the Strains incident could have been serious and even dire repercussions, but it actually ended with few serious injuries stemming from an angle that went awry, combining with a planned angle resulting in mass panic among the fans. Irate fans left phone messages here to many other places vowing to never return because of the belief that the promotion was responsible for putting people's lives in danger to get an angle over and had pushed the envelope way too far. But most believe the nature of ECW audience is such that the next show would sell out anyway. So that's an interesting thing. I mean, this is kind of a dividing line where you have people that feel a certain way that they were put in danger. And then some other people, we see those fans still exist today that go to these deathmatch shows. They sit first row of GCW and they're getting glass on them and people are spilling blood on them. And that's just the nature of wrestling fans. Some of them are bleeding themselves from the weapons at ringside. That's sort of the fandom that exists even today. Back then, there's going to be people that are there for the first time. Like, I want to check this out, see Eddie Guerrero wrestle, and then they get lit on fire. Like, of course, they're not going to want to be there. But some people are like, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen. I can't wait to go back next month.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of, it's like heavy metal. You go to a heavy metal show, sure, you got the guy doing PCP and running into the pit full swinging during Slayer, but like you're still attracted to the whole madness of it all.
So this is what went down. After the final match of the show where Tommy Dreamer with Terry Funk in his corner pinned Cactus Jack with Raven in his corner, the heels doubled on Funk, who left for the dressing room. The two of them destroyed a badly bloodied Dreamer who had a broken nose legit earlier in the match. Funk came out with a branding iron on fire and chased Jack and Raven. Jack went back and came out with a chair with a cloth or shirt that had lighter fluid or kerosene on it being in flames. Jack then hit Dreamer with the chair and his shirt caught fire momentarily. Apparently the chair was supposed to be thrown by Jack to the ropes as a tease at Funk, but not meant to hit anyone. Instead, the cloth wound up on Funk, who immediately went up in flames from head to toe, with his shirt burning instantaneously. Jack immediately tried to put the fire out, which of course would be breaking character. Apparently, the reaction from Funk, who was on fire, and getting the cloth off him led to cloth winding up in the first row where flames grew larger. A fan caught on fire, although every story was different in exactly what led to the cloth being in the front row, and Funk wasn't even sure. The ring also caught fire, possibly from the remnants of the kerosene that was being used from Rocco Rock in the previous match, and said it is made of plywood underneath. The potential of what could have happened was scary, and they were very lucky nothing happened any more serious than what did. Craziness, and we'll talk about the fallout there. But man, it seems like they're up in the ante. They're trying to use fire, and they continue to use fire, by the way. This isn't the last time they do it. They didn't learn their lesson. But this could have went really, really poorly, man. This would have been really, really bad. Yeah,
no, absolutely. But I mean, it was, it's one of those things, you go to war, you expect some bullets, you expect some shit, not in this manner. You're not expecting to get lit on fire if you're sitting in the crowd. But I mean, shit happens, and you got to be vigilant.
What made it even worse is that this angle where the lights were supposed to go out and no one in the back realized what was going on. They still continue to do the angle. So at the same time, all this was going on, the lights go out. And when they were put back on, Dreamer was supposed to be hung from the eagle's nest by his hands, spread apart in crucifixion style by Raven, which is exactly what happened. However, with the fire in the front row, the lights went out to the angle and others started spraying the place with fire extinguishers. There was a panic in the crowd. However, most reports were fans left the building without much pushing and shoving, and people weren't trampled on and escaped to get out. Although the area, and there was a lot of chair throwing, numerous fans were coughing badly outside the building from the fire extinguisher and the fire fumes. But few had minor cuts and bruises, being hit with chairs. There were fans hit by chairs who were bleeding, but none were injured seriously. Just chaos. All I could see is just like, it's like the Donald Glover meme where he walks in, he's carrying the pizza and everything's on fire. And there's Tommy Dreamer hanging on a crucifix by Raven. Like, oh, we're not doing the angle anymore, guys? Like, I'm already up here.
And Raven's just sitting there like, don't be a bunch of pussies. Come on, let's go.
So Meltzer continues. He said 1 or 2 were hospitalized. The backstage crew, after killing the power, do the angle, which caused the panic. Apparently unable to get the lights on quick enough. It appeared the most serious injuries to a fan was a hand burn from the fire by a ringside regular who was hospitalized, and Funk received second-degree burns on his arm and back. There were also cars vandalized in the parking lot, and at least one car was stolen. Fans near the fire panicked, and numerous fans outside the building were furious, blaming the promotion and Heyman for leading to the situation that got out of hand. Others were chanting ECW, ECW, saying it was a great way to finish the show. So you have people from both sides of the fence. We got calls to ECW the next day. They ranged from people who swore they would never return, and then others who, as you probably guess, thought it was the greatest thing they've ever seen in their life. Funk apparently was really, really mad in the back after the match because of how everything went down. Obviously, he was upset that he was hurt, badly burned, basically destroyed the dressing room, including throwing an electric fan through a table and chairs everywhere before calming down and apologizing to everyone. So after this, Funk wasn't supposed to wrestle any more ECW shows, but he actually requested to wrestle the 11/18 show because he felt he needed to, because it was important for ECW to get the fans back on the next show. So Heyman, who didn't want to make any comments about the situation until revealing all the films, had told people after the show it would be the last time fire would ever be used as a prop in ECW, which we know is a goddamn lie.
Wink, wink, nod, nod.
So thoughts on that? I mean, I threw a lot of information at you, but that was, I was reading that with bated breath. Like, I cannot believe that happened. And they showed up the next month to another show.
Yeah. Listen, I again, you gotta, you go to play with matches, you're going to see fire, right? Like it's part of the shtick, but I could see a lot of people, much as the woos that we get when you're at a WWE event and you're walking through the corridors of the arena, the fans still chant ECW when people are literally on fire. So the fandom's there is obviously a clusterfuck of mishap, and Funk had every right to be pissed off. It's very, they're very lucky it didn't get worse than it was, but also good shit. I don't know.
So we also, on the same show, we had Conan and Rey Mysterio teaming up against Psychosis and La Parka. And the only thing of note for that match, aside from being a really good match, was that an impromptu finish because Psychosis swung a chair at Mysterio, or vice versa, I should say. Mysterio swung a chair at Psychosis, and it hit Psychosis in the lip, which cut his lip all the way to his nostrils, and he had to receive plastic surgery that night in the hospital to fix his face. So that also happened on the show as well, where Psychosis had to get his face fixed. And I've never heard that story, but that's wild as well.
Yeah, no, and listen, shit happens. Again, you see it happen all the time. Fucking people, get messed up, and I'm glad Psychosis didn't get a super serious injury, but that is a big split to get in the face, man. You're talking a good inch of reality right there.
Yeah, they didn't mention stitches. They said plastic surgery.
Plastic surgery, yeah.
Yeah, it's
so
wild.
it was probably really fucked up.
So Sabu and Devin Storm, who we know from WCW, and we also know him as Crowbar, must have torn the house down at the NWA show at 1028 in Woodbury, New Jersey. This Dennis Coralluso show that Heyman said, Sabu, if you work that goddamn show, you're never working with me again. 625 fans show up. And Meltzer said, we received more calls about this match than any indie match in recent memory, with nobody rating it less than 4.5 stars. And most giving it 5, with many longtime area indie fans saying it was the best match they'd ever seen. The two went 27 minutes and 2 seconds in Sabu's first Northeastern match since the split with ECW. Sabu and Heyman had a lengthy conversation the day before, although not about him coming back to ECW anytime soon. So, man, that's a match to seek out. I'm not sure if it exists somewhere, but yeah, we talked about that Sabu match as well that I sent you. I forget, it was against that indie wrestler that that was a wild match too. The quality was so shitty because it was on a video camera but you can kind of get the idea about it.
The fan cam, man. But yeah, no, this is probably a really good match. Crowbar was a fantastic worker, so I wouldn't expect anything less.
So as we continue down here, November 13th, 1995 newsletter, as the fallout from the fire incident obviously was going to happen, and people outside the wrestling business had something to say. And this was the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission scheduled a closed-door meeting regarding ECW for 11/9 after received numerous complaints regarding the fire going out of control, combined with the lights being turned off at the 1028 ECW Arena show. Very little else is known right now regarding possible sanctions, if any, that would be considered regarding the promotion. Pennsylvania deregulated pro wrestling to an extent several years ago due to a lobbying effort by Titan Sports. The commission still gets a tax cut, but basically no longer enforces any rules. There was a period of time where James J. Binns ran the commission's operations in Philly, and after being freaked out at the Jim Crockett show years ago when Crockett and Dusty Rhodes were running Bloodfest show in Philly, cracked down on blading. So they go into history of that about, I mean, it's crazy because you hear the word Titan there. They got wrestling pretty much banned so that no one can run in a mile's distance to WWF. Shit's dirty. So like, this is just a reason for Pennsylvania to shut down ECW, and they don't really need much reason if they're being padded by a different person that is throwing any sort of, money in their pocket for doing the right thing in their eyes. But I don't think you can blame Pennsylvania if they said, we don't want wrestling running in our state because we can't be responsible for people being lit on fire at these events.
100%, man.
So according to Ringsiders, what actually happened was that the towel drenched in kerosene and lighter fluid that was on fire on the chair ripped apart, with a small portion of it catching on Terry Funk's back and arms and a larger portion going to the front row, causing a pretty big fire. At roughly the same time as fire extinguishers were being sprayed to the point that people were choking on fumes, the lights were shut off to do the crucifixion angle. So I think if the lights didn't get turned off, they probably could have got it under control. But I think both things happening at the same time caused the mass panic, and that's where the situation worsened.
Yeah, I listen. I do remember the story now that we're talking about it more and more. I think it was on one of the documentaries, maybe something Paulie talking about it. But one of the worst nights in ECW history. Yeah, man, I'm sure. I haven't been to many events where there's been mass panic, but lights shutting off, fire going all over the place, I would freak the fuck out a little bit too.
So we also have some big news here in this newsletter talking about Public Enemy had a meeting with Vince McMahon on 11/2 about coming in. While no deal is confirmed right now, it is generally believed both sides were happy with the meeting. It's more likely a question of when rather than if. The meeting was set up through Paul Heyman, as WWF has told Heyman they don't want to hurt his group or go behind his back. They go into detail. Meltzer talks about the fit that Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge would have in WWF. We know that they stop in WCW prior the next year. Both runs are underwhelming for sure. They never quite hit the heights that ECW has, but this is what we talked about. ECW creates a buzz for these guys where they can make life-changing money, and they just never are the same when they leave. It's like Public Enemy is the latest example of it, but you can talk about many, many other guys. Sandman, he feels the same way. Like if you take him out of the ECW fishbowl, they just don't thrive. I mean, Public Enemy was a product, and it's to their credit too. It's not a knock on them. They're just a credit to what ECW was able to do. They emphasized themselves, and it made them seem like they were a little bit more fun in this environment. They definitely sucked in WCW.
No, they would listen. We've completely turned around 360, 180. From when we were watching WCW to now. Like we're like, oh yeah, they're great, but WCW was like, why are they doing all this? And it was because they weren't correctly booked.
So let's move on here. We have the most talked about thing this past week's TV was Steve Austin. Austin wore a black wig impersonating Eric Bischoff, announcing on Monday NyQuil, where the big boys play with each other. He got him some funny lines, including pretending to fall asleep, calling the matches because the matches were so boring, building up a match with Geritol on top of the pole for the old codgers in WCW, and making light of Bischoff not being able to call the matches because he doesn't know any of the moves. So more Austin stuff, get him on TV. He can't wrestle because of the torn tricep, but brilliant move for them. And that's really what gets him over eventually in 97 when he breaks his neck at SummerSlam. They keep him on TV, let him cut promos, and that's when he gets his most over.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, and I will give them the same credit towards Taz when Taz couldn't wrestle. Bring him out on commentary, bring him out as a referee. It really adds character to that level, and something you wouldn't see normally if they're just going out there working a match week to week. You build it up, and it was great, man.
So going to the November 20th, 1995 newsletter, this is the last stop before we get in our fix. And this has been a long newsletter, but a lot of good information to break down. We had the hearing held on 11/9 regarding ECW with the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, regarding the incident on 10/28 with the fire and the lights turned out. Officially, the meeting was confidential, and all officially come out of the meeting is that the state attorney general and lawyers from both sides are reviewing punishment, which would be made public in 2 weeks. From Meltzer's sources, it appears that Ed Zone, who is the promoter of record for the ECW show, will be fined technically for not having a doctor at the show in violation of the state law for pro wrestling. Since the commission, for the most part, stopped regulating for what went on within pro wrestling a few years back, they were powerless to find anyone else through. It is said that Paul Heyman was told in no uncertain terms that if another incident was to occur like this, that ECW would be shut down. So kind of got off light here.
Yeah.
And no doctor on staff. What do we do?
Slap on the wrist, man. Slap on the wrist. But yeah, no, absolutely terrible. I mean, we even seen EMTs come out in November to remember. Come on, you gotta get your doctors out there. We
also had conversation about ECW's top regular acts will be leaving shortly. The situation with Public Enemy has changed somewhat since last week, and Kevin Sullivan offered the two a 6-month contract to join WCW. Reports from those close to the two indicate they may, if anything, be slightly leaning towards WCW rather than WWF because the wrestlers they talked with in WWF gave them less than favorable versions of the current situation. That's where they eventually go. But the bigger issue is that ECW's talent is being pillaged, and they can't keep up with it eventually. So Public Enemy, the latest example of it.
100%.
The other name who met with Titan this past week was Cactus Jack, who has just moved from New York to Atlanta. Was thought that his look and style to be a wrestler the WWF would never be interested in, but times have changed. He was said to be very close to going with some saying could be shortly after the Rumble. Heyman supposedly told WWF officials, which had been attempted to make friends rather than enemies, they didn't want to lose Jack until he could properly finish the current program, which is said to be of April 96, and WWF said they were in no hurry to bring him in. WWF is also looking at ECW as a place where they can send their own wrestlers to get work next year since they aren't going to be running in as many house shows. And guys are already complaining about not getting enough dates. Jack is longtime good friends with Troy Martin, which is WWF's Dean Douglas, who is well known to be unhappy with the situation with Titan, which may be proved to be a factor as well. So Foley's not far off from going to WWF, and he gets over like crazy in WWF with the Mankind character. But just another example of raising your stock and getting yourself over to the point where you're desirable elsewhere.
100%. Foley was a different being, man. I mean, he was bred that hardcore cloth, and watch him wrestle in WCW, ECW. You really got to see it, but he really didn't show. Again, I'm going to go back to character one more time, but he didn't show that character until he was in ECW. Mikey likes it. He really, really likes it. It's that you bring the best out of somebody. Of course, they're going to get hired in the bigger and better pasture.
Woman, a.k.a. Nancy Sullivan, is almost certainly headed to WCW after the first of the year. If Sherry Martel is phased out, Woman will manage Harlem Heat. If not, word is that she'll be brought in to manage DDP and feud with Johnny B. Bad, who will be managed by Paige's real-life wife, Kimberly Diamond Doll. WCW is also making a push for Conan. So, yeah, I mean, any talent that's on ECW making waves. That's why that's WWF's relationship with ECW is so beneficial to ECW because they want to play ball. Like, okay, we understand you want Cactus, but can you please let him just finish this program with us? Well, WCW didn't give a shit. They were pulling guys out and saying, fend for yourselves.
Yeah, terrible.
We have Conan is close to getting his own show for AAA in Mexico, which is going to pattern after ECW for Channel 12 in Tijuana, which was interesting. And this is also going to air in San Diego. So Conan is like, oh, this is really working in America. I'm going to try the ECW product in Mexico and see how it goes.
And it works.
And then finally here, this is just a letter from Kathy Collins of Mount Laurel, New Jersey. She said, I've just read the Public Enemy may be going to the WWF. This is turning into a sad state of affairs for ECW. I've also read that Heyman was working with the WWF and Public Enemy, so that maybe they'll be open to a working relationship, and Public Enemy will be occasionally able to return. I'd rather see a working relationship with WCW so we could see Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Chris Benoit. I'm starting to feel like ECW is the training ground for the so-called big boys. I like the new wrestlers from Mexico, but I don't think they can run a whole show with them. I go to every show in Philly, but it's starting to wear thin. At the last show, Sandman was looking like he was the Walking Dead. The Dudley thing is like the Dungeon of Doom. I'm sure once Steve Austin gets the right offer, he won't be around anymore. I'm not thrilled about Todd and Alfonso. Neither can even fake a fight properly. It looks good until the edited version on TV, but in person, they look silly. I never watched wrestling until my husband talked me into going to ECW show, and I became hooked on the real talent they had. There isn't much of it left. Sabu, Benoit, Shane Douglas, and Malenko are gone, and what we have left is a bunch of Dudleys. Ugh. Just an interesting perspective of someone who's frustrated with the talent being lifted there. So She ends our happy hour as we get into our fix. Dude, this is the longest happy hour I think we've ever done. An hour and 9 minutes.
It's been a good one.
So many good things to talk about.
Yeah, no, 100%. You gotta expect the quality and the quantity at this point, not just quantity over quality or quality over quantity, but goddamn, let's get into it, brother.
It is time to get our fix here. Extreme Championship Wrestling presents Hardcore TV 9/19/95 from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We get shown a match from Gangsta's Paradise. The Pitbulls defeated ECW World Tag Team Champions Raven and Stevie Richards in a double dog collar match. So repeating the Gangsta's Paradise, but we get a Cactus promo on Tommy Dreamer. Really good one. And then we also hear from the Dudley boys where Big Dick Dudley had a complete reconstructive knee surgery. Big Dick just groans and they zoom in on his eyes at the end of the segment. And then we get a Tommy Dreamer promo where he's sitting on steps and is talking about Cactus Jack turning on him. So a decent episode of Hardcore TV. We get more continuation of Dreamer and Cactus, and they show the double dog collar match. It was the first time a lot of fans probably saw it. So it was, a good episode on TV when someone turned it on.
Hell yeah.
Moving to the 9/26/95 Hardcore TV, we had 2 matches also from Gangsta's Paradise. Hack Myers defeated JT Smith by countout, and Rey Mysterio Jr. defeated Psychosis. We also had the promo from the Pitbulls cutting a promo saying they kicked the asses of Raven and Stevie, but they also took their babe and they have Francine with them. We have Todd Gordon and Bill Alfonso will be the special referees for the match. Todd Gordon promises there will be a winner and a loser. We also have a segment where Raven and Stevie sitting somewhere, and Raven says they're still standing despite everyone coming after them. And then our final segment of the show, we have New Jack punches out a cameraman, but we get another one. There's confrontation between the Gangsters and Public Enemy. Joey Styles takes the cameraman and go to see what's going on. And of course, it's the Steve Austin moment, acting like Hogan. Steve Austin doesn't know if he has what it takes to be a superstar according to WCW. His shirt said Steve Mania. It's that famous Austin ECW moment. So Steve Austin finally has arrived in ECW according to their canon here. And he gives the company another credible name. He's pissed. He's angry. He wants his shine. And it's definitely going to provide a short period of time for gold for the company. This was another solid episode of ECW, especially when you're watching. You get 2 episodes, 2 matches from Gangsta's Paradise. And what else can you ask for?
Yeah, and you get Stone Cold Steve Austin rocking a Steve Austin Mania weight belt, which I was very impressed by.
Hell yeah. So on the October 3rd, 1995 Hardcore TV, this is a very important episode. We have Mikey Whipwreck and Public Enemy defeating ECW World Champion, the Sandman, ECW TV Champion, Cold Scorpio, and New Jack in a steel cage match. This is from Gangsta's Paradise, but some of the stuff we had going on here, we have Beulah said she reads the letters written to her in what she calls Beulah's box. She also says that her box is always open. She's a lady, everybody. Tommy Dreamer tells Lance Wright to shut up before his promo. He says they can keep pushing him when he is normal. He has his revenge on Cold Scorpio, but it was taken away by Cactus. And then, of course, we see footage of Steve Austin showing up on September 23rd show in Middletown, New York before the ECW World Championship match. Great promo from Austin. He calls the place an absolute shithole, and he says he's horrified to be in the area. He says WCW would never book a wrestling match here, and Austin says that he appreciates that Sandman kicks someone's ass to win the title instead of licking one. Austin says that Sandman's name isn't Hogan and he can whip his ass. So he's immediately being thrust in the main event here, and this was a huge moment for ECW. We're like, okay, we're going to use this guy as our main guy. He doesn't stay long, but it's a cool moment here.
Yeah, no, awesome.
And then the last segment, we had Cactus Jack apologizing for his behavior a few weeks ago because he gets a little emotional when it comes to wrestling. Cactus explains his background and sees a special on 2020, which challenging wrestling and put it down. His friends laughed at him for wanting to be a wrestler. And this is like an emotional promo. But then on the other end of it, he continues to be a heel. But like the way he could toy with emotion, like Cactus's promos are just next level. Meltzer probably is using hyperbole in the newsletter, talking about how it's the best interview he's ever seen. I don't know if it's that. And maybe we're just so diluted with so much interviews and so much wrestling we watched, but he was cut from a cloth that nobody was. And I think that has to be appreciated. In 1995 context, nobody was doing what he was doing.
Yeah, and I'm sure at the time that was probably one of the most profound interviews in pro wrestling. So obviously Mick Foley, he's a wordsmith. He's a lyricist in the world of a musical. He's goddamn great, man.
Moving to the 10-10-95 hardcore TV, we had Taz defeating Jason Knight and Cactus Jack defeated El Porto Ricano. Steve Austin opens the show, calling Eric Bischoff to be fired over the phone. This is one of the other famous segments. Austin talks about Dusty not wanting to push him against Sting and Savage. Just calling people out by name. Like, this is just raw Stone Cold and like what's character, what's not. I feel like it's all from the heart here where he's just bitter about what happened. And that brings out that side of Austin that becomes eventually the Stone Cold character. He wanted to recreate the Hollywood Blondes, but they needed him as a singles role. He was promised a U.S. title reign and #1 contender and world title shot, but that never happened. He says politics in WCW kept the biggest superstar down on the ground. He was being used to get guys like Marcus Bagwell and Alex Wright over, like cut no corners, pulled no punches. He said ECW is going to find out firsthand what Austin is capable of doing. And he said, and I quote, "I'm going to be the superstar that I always knew I could be because there was no one in ECW that can stop me." I mean, Austin arrived. This was like, this was Stone Cold. This was, and
that's the coolest thing. It was before, I mean, a couple months before Stone Cold. I mean, you give him a year, maybe even, like he was doing the Stone Cold shtick here in full. And it was great. I loved every minute of it.
We have the ECW World Champions, Sandman, and women are interviewed. Women suggest that Steve Austin can join them, enjoy the benefits, or stray away and deal with the consequences. So we're getting a feud potentially with Sandman and Steve Austin, but we know the title will fall off Sandman and the feud shifts to Mikey. But Sandman and Austin are like, it's funny because Austin, I wouldn't say he took the beer stuff from Sandman, but I guess you could say he did.
Yeah.
He borrowed it, let's just say.
In a more classier gesture. He wasn't smoking cigarettes and smashing on his head. He was just coming out and getting, a couple brews in after a good match.
So we have the Steiner brothers sharing some thoughts on the Eliminators. They said they are here because they can get wild and crazy. Scott thinks their name is stupid and they're going to take them out. Rick Steiner, gets on the mic, he's essentially doing the old school dog-faced gremlin promo. Yeah, he wants to just come to the ECW arena and find out. I mean, the four of those guys get in the ring and they can steal the show.
Yeah.
So other stuff on the show, we got ECW TV champion Cold Scorpio laughing that Dreamer got hurt, and he likes to see people get hurt. Scorpio is obsessed with being champion. He doesn't care about anyone else. Scorpio has a mini belt collection thing going on during this couple months where he wants all the titles. And it's interesting that I guess Too Cold's the guy who's staying. So I talked about this last week with the TV title. They're bouncing it around all over the place because I think they didn't know who was going. Of course, Dean Malenko and Eddie were shifting the titles and both are no longer here. I think they just want to put the title on someone that's going to be there the next month and they don't want to worry about it. And that's why the title changed hands like 3 or 4 times in the same 4 weeks because they didn't know what was happening with Eddie. He was leaving. He wasn't leaving. He was staying.
Yeah.
But Cold Scorpio, they're confident that they're going to be building around him for a little bit here.
I'm here for it because I approve of Cold Scorpio being all the belt collected.
And then at the end of the show, Raven and Cactus cut a promo about Dreamer getting hurt due to his selfish ways. The combination of Raven and Cactus is great. Raven says that Cactus needs Dreamer for a higher purpose and he's not there. Raven says he is friends with Cactus and it should be Tommy. Cactus says a show of force was necessary to give Dreamer a message. He doesn't think the fans understand what he's going through. And he says, sometimes I watch TBS just to watch their good, wholesome programming. Cactus asks, how long did Dreamer think TBS was going to wait for him? This was a very, very interesting segment. Again, using this hardcore TV thing to really get these guys time to speak. I mean, Steve Austin was an example of a Cactus Jack here, Raven. Yeah. These guys were just going out and having the freedom to cut promos, not scripted. They were really just stepping into their own. And that you can tell that this was from the creative mind of both of these guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man.
So Tommy Dreamer's in the ring all taped up and he has someone on the phone that's going to watch his back and be in his corner. Tommy Dreamer then reveals it's going to be Terry Funk to combat Cactus Jack. The fans erupt and that ends the program. The Austin promo was good. And then obviously the reveal that Terry Funk will be his partner, Dreamer's partner to help him in the feud. That was awesome. And Scorpio as a heel has been a nice little bright spot. So I think it's been a pretty strong episode of hardcore TV.
Absolutely, man.
So then we have the 10-17-95 hardcore TV from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Psychosis defeating Rey Mysterio Jr. in a best 2 out of 3 falls match on 10-7. This was an ECW live show taping. Meltzer talked about it in the newsletter, giving it 4.25 stars. But other things on this show, the Dudley family cutting a promo. They reveal the debut of Bubba Ray Dudley. Dudley says he only does interviews because he's the only true Dudley. Big dick happened because their father had a liaison with the Holland Tunnel. So whatever that means, we just get the debut of Bubba, who is the most famous Dudley out of all of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we had a good 2 out of 3 falls match, as I mentioned before. That match was really well received. And this was like kind of their coming out party. Both of these guys have been on the shows before, but I think this was the main time where people were like, wow, these guys can really keep up with what we're used to as far as wrestling goes. And they had the opportunity to really put, a different style for the US and not be held back by what the restrictions were in maybe WCW or WWF at the time. Heyman said, go out and do your thing and just be free to do the lucha style. You guys want to go high flying, you want to go out of the ring, you want to use tables, do whatever you want.
Yeah. Too much, wonder it made magic.
So, I mean, most of the show was the Ray and Psychosis match, but they used some other spots with angles. We got another Raven and Stevie promo. They also showed that they regained the tag titles from the Pitbulls on October 7th. So there's a lot of stuff going on with titles changing hands, and I'll talk about that as we get to November to Remember, where all the titles kind of changed hands. But the hour goes quick. This is one of those things where got to remember there's no other time for people to consume ECW, so they're trying to catch everybody up, and it's hard to fill the gaps in.
Yeah, 100%, man.
So on the 1024, before we move on we have 2 more episodes of Hardcore TV. The 1024-95, no matches, but they show Public Enemy winning the ECW tag titles in a 3-way dance against Raven and Stevie and the Pitbulls. Stevie's interviewed about Johnny Grunge setting a fire under his butt and wants revenge on Grunge. We have the Sandman saying he's the king of extreme, is going to get very extreme on October 28th. And then Tommy Dreamer says he fears no evil. And finally, the end, we have final build up for the end of November to Remember. Cactus Jack says he will not be prevented from achieving the righteousness. He loves Dreamer enough for both of them because Dreamer has no love for himself. Dreamer yells that he's going to bring the hardcore back out of Cactus Jack. So very cool segment to really build it up.
Yeah. No.
And then the next part here, 1031, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is a huge moment. Mikey Whipwreck defeated ECW World Champion Sandman in a ladder match to win the title. This was filmed 1028 at a live event. So huge moment. And curious that they don't do this on one of the super cards, but they do it here. We see it on Hardcore TV. So if you want to see the crowning moment for Mikey, it's here. But the match is pretty good. I mean, Sandman whack Whipwreck from behind. Mikey plays the underdog the whole match. Match gets 2.5 stars according to Meltzer. Not great, but it is a great moment for Mikey to win the big one. It felt like no one knew it was going to happen. So when he actually pulled the title down, the fans popped over. I mean, this was awesome. And I think obviously Whipwreck's not going to be a long-term champion, but I think it's an interesting decision. And I think it's all because Paul Heyman has his finger on the pulse about what the fans were liking. And they understand, like, moving in that direction was not the plan, but he's like, you know what? People really like him. Let's do it.
Of course, man. He's the ultimate underdog and not a better person to put a title on, especially the title. I bet you it caught a lot of people off guard. It was a fucking moment to be there for.
So on the 11/7/95 Hardcore TV, we had 2 matches. JT Smith defeated El Puerto Ricano and Hack Myers defeated Dances with Dudley. And then, some segments here. And really the main thing here is Public Enemy battling Cold Scorpio and Sandman at November to Remember. And they want to win the tag titles back, win the TV title back, and get an ECW championship match. So a lot of things going on in one match and a lot of eggs thrown in that one basket. We talked about Cold Scorpio being booked as a main heel. It's pretty evident here. He's the guy they're going to be building around.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 100%.
And then 11/14, the final Hardcore TV. No matches were aired in their entirety, but it's really just Cactus in the ring talking about how proud he is of Mikey for winning the title. And he said he believes the fans ruined his moment and would rather be watching TBS programming. He says he wants to slap Dreamer, but he isn't going to do that. And he promises that his match with Dreamer will be the most boring match anyone has ever seen. So we get more promos from them. And then we get one from Conan, who says he wants to earn the respect of Rey Mysterio and Psychosis. And the Lucha Libre tag match that we see during this match is heavily clipped. So Conan and Ray cut off double suicide dives to win the match via countout. But it's not even worth reviewing because they cut the match middle. It was like a 10-minute match, but they showed 2 minutes of it.
Yeah. Bastards.
That's it for Hardcore TV, dude. Let's get into November to Remember, why we came here. And we finally got there. We have about 40 minutes to break it down. 11/18/95 from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Our current champions are as follow. World champion Mikey Whipwreck, who won it back on 10/28/95. Our TV champion is Too Cold Scorpio. He won it back on 8/25/95. And our tag champions right now are Too Cold Scorpio and Sandman, who won it at 10/28/95. To give you guys a little history of the tag title since we last had you here, Scorpio defeated Rocco Rock in a title versus title singles match to win the tag team title and retain the ECW World TV title. He chose Sandman as his partner. The title change aired on November 7th, 95 via tape delay. Public Enemy also had the titles on 10/7/95. There has been 3 title changes since we left off. The Pitbulls lost the titles back to Raven and Stevie on 10/7 and lost them in a 3-way to Public Enemy in a match, also including the Gangstas. That being said, dude, we now have Joey Styles leading us in. I want you to get it in right here, hype it up, and then lead us into Donnie Allen versus the Broad Street Bully.
Oh my God, hold on. It's November 18th, 1995. We're at the ECW Arena. Your host, Joey Styles. We're rocking and rolling, brother. It is November to remember 1995. We're going right into it, man. It's beautiful. Styles is talking about Terry Funk retiring. You know, very bittersweet moment. We know it happens 40 years later. It's insane. But we get Donnie Allen versus the Broad Street Bully. And yeah, we got special guest ring announcer Bubba Ray Dudley coming out in a beautiful tuxedo, bow tie, looking spiffy as it gets, man. And you know, he comes out there and he's ready to roll. And he goes, "Let's get ready to rumble." He gets pissed off, man, and he goes right after Don E. Allen and gives him a power bomb, and he pins Bully for 3. It wasn't really a match, but it was a match. It was fun. It was great. Good to see Bubba. I like my face lit up when he came walking out of the curtain. I was so excited, and I was like, here we are, because obviously I had to miss last week's shot of nostalgia. This was beautiful to kind of walk into this and see so many familiar faces of the show. But Bubba comes out there, does his shit, and then we cut the good old Paul E in the ring, brother. And he's dim the lights. The lights don't dim; they cut out black. No fire this time, though. Very safe, very safe lights out segment. But the lights come back on, and the biggest reveal, I think, of our whole year covering this is none other than Sabu in the ring, rocking the gold, glittery pants. The crowd seems so fucking over. I was excited. I was over. I popped so hard. This was beautiful, dude. So happy to see Sabu back in the ECW ring, the arena. It's great, man.
So 2 things. My question to you, and I think we've seen every event follow this formula, but what do you think about them opening with these squash matches to get the crowd going? It seems more times than not, ECW has these matches that it's not like, I don't know, the formula I would use as a promoter or a booker, and my favorite shows, I should say, it was when they open with a banger. You think about AEW opening up the pay-per-view with MJF and Jungle Boy that one time, or MJF and Darby Allin, where it's like set the tone for the night. It's going to be fast-paced action. ECW kind of saves those for the middle of the card, and they open up with an angle just to get people to react. And that's exactly what this was. We had Bubba Ray kind of getting over here with the ring announcing thing, and it's just a squash angle to get the Dudleys over with the crowd. It's interesting to me.
No, it's good. I don't not like it when it's done right. This is done kind of on the correct spectrum of things. Obviously, it's not a 4-hour promo starting off Monday Night Raw, but it's good. It's very entertaining. It's fun. Again, I'm so happy to see Bubba, and it paints a picture like, yeah, he's this guy that's coming out there. He's got a stutter, but don't fuck with him. You know, he literally clotheslines the dude's head off, and it becomes what it is, and it's great. And then going right into the Paulie thing, it's really good, good timing, good pacing to start off a show, I thought.
100%. And the thing with Sabu is this had me saying never say never with wrestling, and it doesn't matter what happens in the past, and it doesn't matter what's currently happening. Anything is possible in wrestling, and 2 parties can get back together if they are willing to do business. And this is an example of it here in 95, and it's sort of making case for momentum with CM Punk eventually down the line getting back with AEW. So this was huge. I mean, this moment was huge. Can't be understated. The fact that they got him back, the fans' reaction, it felt like he was returning home. It sucks. I mean, lost in this is that run in WCW wasn't well received, and Sabu didn't fit in WCW and wasn't booked well. but we all knew
Yeah.
that was going to happen. The fact that it happened that way so quickly, I mean, blessing in disguise, because we got more Sabu in 95. I didn't think we would, honestly, but it's awesome to see him back.
Absolutely. And it was like the very, very sweetness too, at this being like our second to last showing for us here covering ECW. So happy it came full circle because we barely got Sabu in this time, and it was good to see him come back and eventually wrestle, and it was good shit, man.
Moving to the next match here, we had Jason Knight taking on Conan. Special ref was Taz. So it's, Conan, we all know him, AAA Conan, WCW Conan, Filthy Animal Conan. Taz is injured. We know he can't wrestle, so they're trying to keep him involved. He's the special ref here. Jason opens his mouth and calls him Monkey Boy. He said Conan gets right in the ring, hits a quick razor's edge. Really well done. Great razor's edge. He does use that in WCW bit. You and I were huge on Conan's run in WCW. I thought he was great. Yeah. This is another example of it. Taz fast counts Jason down at 14 seconds. Match was another squash. So in between the sandwich, the bread of the sandwich of that juicy Sabu return were 2 squash matches, but the fans seem very happy with it. You know what I mean? It's weird because it would be not well received today, but fans seem very content to see Jason Knight get his ass kicked, and then the Dudleys get their moment right before the Sabu thing. So everyone's happy at this point, but we haven't really seen much wrestling yet.
No, absolutely. But I mean, the story is there, especially in retrospective. I mean, we can see Bubba Ray Dudley, in his earliest light. And then we get, it's just Conan wrestling in ECW is great, man. And it wasn't a terrible couple seconds. It was great. Like, I thought it was fantastic. And Taz kind of selling that referee role. I don't care what happens out there, brother. I'm just here to make sure shit goes down. And it eventually plays off in the bigger picture of the show. So I think this was good seed planting for later storytelling.
So I'll let you lead the next match. We have El Porter Ricano taking on Stevie Richards. Stevie's awesome here. Lead us through.
Yeah, no, this is great. So Stevie's walking in the ring and he's just laughing. He's doing his thing, shaking hands, kissing babies. And then he runs into this guy that hands him a shirt, and we very familiar face. If you recall, is the one and only Blue Meanie hanging out in the front row. And Richards is like, "Come on, man, get over the rail. We're best buds. Like, let's chum it out. You gave me this T-shirt. We're gonna hang out. We're gonna do good, man." And it was really, really just a fun, quick match. I mean, we get to see the Meanie Salt. It was a good introduction for Blue Meanie. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was fucking fun. It was great. Good to see Steven Richards outside of the Raven bubble a little bit more, and just kind of doing his own thing, and kind of the seed planting for the BWO. It was really cool. I had a smile on my face the whole time. I didn't care what happened in the match. It was just fun, and it was good. It was just silly. And Richards, of course, gets the win. A great super kick by Richards, by the way. I was not expecting how fucking great that looked. And, Joey Styles calls it right away. Oh, the super kick, it's over. And, he gets the 1, 2, 3. It was a quick match, 3 minutes. And it was fun, though. It was fucking great.
The best thing about these debuts here is they feel so natural. Like Bubba Ray Dudley slides in the fold. Francine slides in the fold. Blue Meanie feels like he's been there forever. And he's going to be there forever. And it's like he's an ECW guy. So I don't know. I thought this was really well done as well.
The shirts,
Blue Meanie and Stevie Richards were made for each other, man. They work so well together.
Yeah, and I love Joey Styles. Like, why is he wearing a cutoff shirt? What's wrong with this man? And, he's just doing his thing. He's got the Blue Meanie gimmick, full blown, man. Glasses painted on. The hair is not quite as blue as we're used to, but goddamn, what a good debut for him. I thought it was great.
I mean, Blue Meanie too is another one of those examples of a guy in ECW that eventually gets signed with WWE. Like he does. I know it was during the time where ECW was in vogue for people, and ECW was like the fresh new thing for after it went out of business, and WWE bought it and they did One Night Stand and all that stuff. But Blue Meanie had a little bit of a run there in WWE TV, and it's because of what he built here, starting in this moment in ECW. So credit to how he's perceived, and Paul Heyman allowing these guys to be themselves. And, I love Stevie and Blue Meanie, and this is the start of their journey together.
Yeah, and Blue World Order really, really took off because of the
so
NWO
awesome.
hype. Like, it was great. It was like the perfect, dumbest, knock on something was the BWO, and it was huge. I loved it, man.
The next match here, we have the Pitbulls with Francine in their corner taking on the Eliminators with Jason. This on paper looks like a really, really good tag match, and it really was. I felt like it was a very good match from the start. Goes pretty long, 11 minutes even. We had the Pitbulls getting the win over the Eliminators. Weird because the Eliminators just debuted, so you'd expect them to kind of get the rub here, but that's sort of old school kind of thinking in my brain about watching WWE for a long time. But it didn't really matter who won this match, which was the best part. Some good action this match. Outside the ring, inside the ring. Everything was going crazy as soon as they stopped making tags. So the ref kind of lost control. The mayhem continued after the match with the Eliminators giving the total elimination to everyone. So despite them losing the match, they still kind of got over at the end, which was like the perfect thing for both teams. And it continues the program after. I think the best moment of the match was seeing Saturn kind of get all his offense in and seeing how athletic he really was. I think Saturn is very, very underrated. I said Sandman multiple times, but it's Perry Saturn, who is such a underrated guy in this era. And also throughout that Erotical era, people always think about Benoit, Eddie, and Dean, but Saturn is one of those guys who consistently delivers great matches. And it sucks to see the state of his life at this point. Like Saturn is in bad shape, but really look at this and see how much potential was there. And he could have been a world champion in his own right, any company he went to.
100%. He was amazing. This was like I said, this was like you were just stating, this was a great, fun match. It didn't matter really who won because both teams got over regardless. But Saturn and Kronos had a hell of a fucking showcase here, and it was a really, really fun watch, man. I love watching Perry Saturn, old and new. And I'm one of the biggest underdog marks for Perry Saturn. I love him to death, man. And it was cool to kind of watch this happen and seeing him with hair again for the first time in probably fucking 20 years. It was fantastic.
I think someone needs to bring back the Super Bomb as a finish, because the finish, it seemed like it was the only thing that can put the Eliminators out. Seeing that Super Bomb land on Saturn at the end just was great. I mean, finishing the match at 11 minutes even was the only way it could end, but the perfect thing was to have the angle at the end where you shoot, where total elimination gets hit and they're able to stand tall. So this is going to continue. Both guys look strong and the tag division's reinvigorated. So you don't really need two Cold Scorpio and Sandman to be your tag champs, but it seems like it's destined to have a team like the Pitbulls and the Eliminators to be facing off for the titles eventually in Public Enemy leave and guys go off to do different things. So you're setting the tone for maybe sometime later in the year or next year to have a tag title feud with these two teams.
Yeah, 100%.
Next match here, the Mexican Death Match, Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis. I'll let you lead the way through this. This is a really, really good match. Probably, in my opinion, the highlight of the show going in. When I saw this on paper, I'm like, this is the reason you want to watch.
Yeah.
Lead us through about what made it so good and what you enjoyed about it.
Dude, so many good spots first back. I mean, Rey and Psychosis going back and forth is like, I don't know how words could describe it. It's like watching paint hit the brush, and then hit the canvas as well. It's beautiful. They had a lot of good back and forth, a lot of really extreme looking spots. It wasn't 100% clear on the Mexican deathmatch rules, so that threw me off a little bit. Booking wise, this could have been a little bit better, but it was fantastic. Like I said, just some really good back and forth between Mysterio and Psychosis. Yeah, it was a great match. Wasn't a phenomenal, I would bet my money on everything to watch this match, but it was fucking fantastic for what it was. And you get a good look at both these guys doing their best work here, man. And not even their best work either, because we get to see them do so much later on. But I mean, if you were watching this in '95, this was probably the best fucking thing you've seen maybe almost all year.
Yeah. So with this match, the reason why I'm familiar with the match at this point is because AEW does their share of the Texas death matches. So from what I understand, and they didn't do a good job of explaining this on the show, you have to be pinned and then you have to stay down for a 10 count. So like early in the match, Rey hit that Dragon Run and got the 3 count, thought the match was over. The fans thought the match was over, but Psychosis had to stay down for a 10 count and he didn't. He got back up. So this kind of happened a few times where the moonsault from Psychosis landing on Rey got the 3 count, then Rey got up and answered the 10 count. So they went back and forth. Near falls were confusing for the fans. Like, I feel like that was the main thing I pulled away, is that they didn't really explain what a Mexican death match was or a Texas death match, whatever the hell. I think this match would have been better suited to have those 3 counts just be 2 counts and leave it as a normal match where you can use weapons, and then it probably would have been better. So everything that happened pretty much that wouldn't have been a 3 count was a 3 count. That's kind of one of those things where it's just like, yeah, it's almost like the Iron Man match mentality where it's something that wouldn't end a match ends a match because it's just
it can
at this point, like, oh, a move that never ends a match. But other than that, it's just nitpicking because again, this is great action that goes almost 15 minutes. That's just epic. So we do eventually get 911 coming out after the match too. So if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, no, 911 comes out. You doing 911 shit. You're ready for him to fucking start choke slamming everybody. But he's very on the fence of being Rey Mysterio's buddy. It was cool to see, Mysterio hanging out on the shoulders at the end of it. It was good. But 911, comes out. We get the Eliminators came out. Jason came out. It was one of those clusterfucky ECW things that worked out great because 911 choke slams both the Eliminators, and it was good, but it had no place to be here. Really did not make any sense, but it was still fun to watch. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, they try to make it obvious that Ray was being offered a contract by Jason, why did he have the right to offer a con? It just was very, very bizarre. So leading into
Mysterio
the next
was like, fuck
here,
him. Yeah,
exactly. ECW Tag Team Championship on the line. Sandman and Too Cold Scorpio, who are the defending champions. Sandman never won the titles. Too Cold Scorpio just picked him as a partner, defending against Public Enemy. So this match here, it's a tag team match for the ECW Tag Team Championship. The winner would become the number 1 contender for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. So this match, back and forth as you'd expect. It's, as limited as it can be. The only guy in this match that has any business really like working is Too Cold Scorpio. So when he's doing stuff, it looks good. Everybody else is sort of just kind of doing what they usually do. Goes very, very long though, dude. This is 60 minutes and 7 seconds. But at the end of the day, they use the tables, they use the spots outside. So it was fun, in my opinion. And my one critique is like, I don't want to see Sandman and Too Cold Scorpio with the tag titles, especially when the match we just saw 2 matches ago, that should really have the tag titles involved. It's a little bit confusing, but to me, Scorpio is the highlight of this match. I thought he looked great. And, he pretty much carries the work rate at this point. And, Sandman right now at this point, he's one of those guys who you either love him or you don't. And then the fans really react strongly to him. And he's one of those guys in this environment. He thrives, but you could see why a guy like Hack wouldn't do well in WCW.
Well, yeah, but again, it was not a lot going on, but a lot going on. Like you said, Too Cold Scorpio, clearly the shining star here. Sandman's double booked and for the wrong reasons. It was interesting, but it wasn't drizzling shits, but it was also a little drizzling shit.
I just went too long. I would have cut 5 minutes off. These guys wouldn't. They kind of did so much at this point. There's a lot going on in the match that it feels.
This could have been a 10-minute.
How many times?
Yeah,
exactly. How many times can you do the somersault plancha and the table spots? It feels like redundant at some point when Public Enemy misused the drive-by and Sandman falls on Grunge for the pin. It just mercifully it was over. People were like, all right, it's finally over. That's where it felt like. If it would have ended 11 minutes, I think everyone would have looked at this a little more fondly.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So now it seems like the winner right now. So both Sandman and Too Cold are now number 1 contenders for the World Championship together. That's what the stipulation was.
Sure.
But why? Like, again, why are they blending this together? Like, why would you have all the titles be blurred together? It seems like you're putting all in the same pot. I don't know. Weird. Maybe because Too Cold's the one guy you can guarantee is going to be there. That's why they want him involved in all the title pictures.
Probably. Hopefully. Who knows? I'm here for it. Too Cold Scorpio for life, man.
All right. So Bill Alfonso taking on Todd Gordon, special referee Beulah McGillicuddy. Lead us through, my friend.
A drizzling shits match. Obviously, you would expect it. It was nothing good. You got to see Fonzie get a little bloodied up. You got to see Gordon fucking kind of give his little shtick back. We seen Buell out there, but the real meat to the bones here was the Taz part of it. Taz comes out rocking the ref shirt. You think he's putting Todd Gordon over. He goes 1, 2, and he picks up Todd Gordon and fucking knocks him right to the back of the floor, and then puts Fonzie over him. And it's basically a couple minutes of Taz telling the fans, go fuck yourself, kid. I ain't doing this for nobody. I'm Taz, bro. I'm here. I'm going to be working with Excalibur in 30 years. I don't need this shit. I'm done with it. So, Taz kind of turning his back on the ECW fan base and just telling them to kind of stick it where the sun don't shine. And nobody cares about my family. Nobody cares about the roof over my head. It's Fonzie cares about me. Fonzie's all bloody. He's like, yeah, man. It sounds like Steve-O after just doing like an 8-ball. Like he's like, yeah, dude, it's gonna go good, bro. And it was good. It was a fun segment. That part of it. The rest of it, the Alfonso winning the match. It was a really quick clusterfuck.
So Sandman comes out. He's scheduled to face Mikey for the ECW title. Steve Austin jumps him, hits the stun gun on the guardrail, takes him out with a kendo stick, and Damage Control. They haul Sandman backstage, and now Austin's going to be taking on Mikey. The crowd seems excited. Austin gets on the mic, cuts a promo. He bitches about Bischoff, Hogan, Flair before jumping Mikey and beating the crap out of him. This is before the bell. So sign guy sign on the front row says, Austin, the future has arrived, which, I mean, apropos, like maybe we're going to be looking at the Starboy Charlie sign 2 weeks in a row on Dynamite. Like, well, the guy was on something. But the fans were chanting Hogan at Austin to upset him. So he had a big boot and a leg drop for a 2 count, which was an awesome spot. I popped.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And then Joey said, that lame ass crap ain't going to get it done here, from Joey Styles, which was awesome. Mikey takes over the floor and Austin begs off, claiming a bad elbow. Match pretty much ends here with Mikey hitting the sunset flip with a pull of the tights, 4 minutes and 38 seconds. He retains the title. Austin immediately gets up, starts beating up Mikey to demonstrate, obviously, he's the stronger guy despite losing. Weird. I want more from them in this program, but I did enjoy it. It was cool to see Austin in the spot and seeing Mikey get the win over him. I'm sure Mikey Whipwreck, this is a moment that lives in his brain forever. This was freaking awesome.
Yeah, no, and I love seeing Austin like cower in fear, like, my elbow, man. Come on, kid, leave me alone. Mikey's a tough guy. Like here, he's giving him fucking everything he's got in his repertoire. He's swinging at him, he's hitting him. It was very entertaining for what it was. I obviously left you wanting more, but I think that was the job, right? Yeah. I really enjoyed seeing Whipwreck get the win over it. A surprising win like Whipwreck would. It was a roll-up. Nobody would expect, Whipwreck to beat Austin in a roll-up. It was great. Absolutely loved it, man.
So take us through the next match. The Shaw Hackmeyers took on the returning Sabu from earlier in the night. Man, we've got Sabu back.
Yeah, no, so happy, first off, to see Sabu back. Weird pairing for his re-debut, his first match back on the card. They throw him with Hackmeyers. There's so many other people he could have wrestled, and it would have been a 10-star match. But I mean, Hackmeyers does a good job taking what he's got. I mean, Sabu gets his spots in, the table spot at the end of it, which was great, and then the Super Arabian Facebuster with the chair, a brutal move, something we will probably never see this day and age in pro wrestling again. I loved it's just seeing Sabu climb to the top turnbuckle and put the chair behind his legs, and you're like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And he does the flip and he crushes guy's head. It's beautiful, man. And it is what it is. Sabu comes out, gets the win. Not a long match, not a short match, about 12 minutes. It was fun, man. I really enjoyed it. Happy to see Sabu back because goddamn, I love watching Sabu wrestle. I really do. It's something so different to this day. Nobody does it like Sabu did.
You said it best. I mean, this was a compilation package for Sabu to get all his stuff in, and then did its spot. And Hackmeyers did a good job of being on the receiving end of all of the beating. And he, of course, got some offense in, but for the most part, it was the compilation highlight package of Sabu. But we moved to the main event. Terry Funk and Tommy Dreamer taking on Raven and Cactus Jack. And this was built up for so long. And I think it lived up, man. This started as a brawl on the floor. They go right from the start. Stevie Richards shows up while Funk empties a trash can of plunder in the ring. We get, Richards going for a ride in the shopping cart from the media. Dreamer hits Raven with the VCR. Funk
beautiful.
Hits Cactus with a snow shovel. So this was like a fantasy ECW match with all the weapons, all the accessories.
No fire.
Cactus Jack, dude, takes his shirt off and reveals the shirt that says, "Forgive me, Uncle Eric," because he's doing the WCW shtick, which is beautiful. If someone can make that shirt, maybe one of those like bootleg wrestling t-shirts can make the "Forgive Me, Eric" shirt. I would wear it.
I want the Dungeon of Doom shirt, man. Nobody like that was I popped so hard. You had Zodiac on there, you had Kamala. It was great. Foley is really harnessing this WCW vibe, and it was fantastic. And then the Eric Bischoff thing, and then on top of that, one of the stiffest fucking chair shots.
Oh my god!
I think if you've ever seen where he's got Bischoff's face up over his with the shirt, and Dreamer just lays it into him. And I showed it to the wife, and she was like, he was expecting it. I was like, yeah, but you don't see it coming. Like, you're fucked. Like, no matter what, that is a stiff shot. And same thing with the VCR. I was like, look, he got hit in the head with the VCR. She's like, that's not too bad. Those things are light. It was like back in 95, those things were like 10 bricks. Those were heavy as fuck. They were made of solid steel. I think you could have flew off to, the moon and landed, and we would have been able to do some magic with a VCR back in those days.
So we had the ref spot. Alfonso and Taz come out, but then the ending sees Raven getting pile driven on the chair by Dreamer. Funk gets the honor of pinning him. 13 minutes and 36 seconds. This match was chaos in the best way possible. Great brutality. The finish was a little messy, but as you'd expect it to be, it was messy because they had a lot of shit to get in, and it's going to be the match. This to me was, ECW at its best. And there's a lot that goes on in this match after the fact as well. And the sight of Raven bleeding and wearing barbed wire around his head gets a lot of controversy at the end of it. And this might be the spot where Kurt Angle feels upset. I think Kurt Angle may have been in the house. We may see this in the newsletter, but Kurt Angle was visiting, potentially working for ECW. It might not be this because he might have been
96.
Yeah, he won the gold medal in 96. I don't think he was involved in wrestling yet, but they, I guess, did this prior to, because this is another type of thing that got him upset, where they do like the religious connotations with they're obsessed with the crucifixion stuff. They did it last week with the fire, and they're doing it again here, but people are going to get upset. I mean, it is what it is, but this is Raven and Dreamer and all of them pressing the limit and pressing the envelope of what storytelling could be in wrestling, and give them at least credit for that.
100%. And fun little detour fact here. One of the first times I've worked with Raven a couple times, and I walked up to his merch table at one of the shows afterwards. It's like, I'd like to buy an 8x10. And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, what do you want on it? And I was like, I want to get it to my grandpa. I was like, so he pulls out the crucifixion 8x10. And my grandpa's a super religious guy, but he had no idea. He didn't put two and two together. But in my grandfather's basement, there is a picture of Raven on the cross with the barbed wire, and it's to Gramps, love Raven.
Amazing.
Absolutely
dude,
amazing.
Fun show. I mean, what better way to kind of end this year with this show? We have 2 more shows to get into, but this roster, though being pillaged by WCW, they're still finding a way to put on entertaining shows and very memorable moments that are still happening on a weekly basis here, or monthly basis, I should say, in ECW.
100%. I mean, right before we started recording, I don't know if it was the tragic week we had. I don't know if we really needed this, fun. But this felt like one of the best shows we covered for ECW, and it was more akin to what ECW was for both of us, I assume, when we were, growing up in the fan base. You had your Sabus, you had Mikey Whipwreck, you had Austin, you had Foley, you had Funk, you had Tommy Dreamer, you had Ray. Like, it was a star-studded Bubba, like everybody was there. Blue Meanie. It really... It felt like a whole ECW episode, and not like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. It was like, oh, there's my friends,
Right.
It's like getting blackout drunk at a bar and then getting picked up by your Uber, and you're like, hey, there you guys are.
So that being said, let's black out, get to our chaser, and talk about our favorite part of November to remember, and then, we'll get our weekend started. Woo! All right, Mike Belcaster, for the chaser, what was your favorite part of, you can even go with anything we talked about, the newsletter, Hardcore TV, or maybe November to Remember. What was your favorite part of this episode?
Listen, stacked episode. First off, I mean, we went through so much news. We went through so much newsletter. We went through so much wrestling. It was great. But my favorite thing, and I would gladly pick Rey Mysterio and Psychosis all day, any day, but I really liked the story weaving from Taz here. Was not expecting him to turn heel. Even though I relived it, I lived it the first time. It was cool to see again. I really was not expecting him, and having him come back out at the end, kind of fucking over everybody. It was great. Big shout out to Tommy Dreamer, Terry Funk, and Cactus and Raven. Austin Whipwreck. Like, there was so much fucking loaded on the card here. It was amazing. The Eliminators, Bubba Ray. Like, I had a blast this week. This episode is my fucking pick of the week.
Hell yeah. And I agree with you, dude, about Ray and Psychosis. On any other given week, I probably would pick it, but I honestly felt most strongly about the Sabu return and what it means for wrestling fandom and how anything is possible, whether it be Bret Hart returning eventually to WWE to go to the Hall of Fame after mending those fences, potentially the CM Punk and FTR return trios match against the Bucks and Omega, if that eventually happens, gives me hope while watching this, because everyone was so down on the potential of Sabu returning. Meltzer felt like it was never going to happen. Heyman said it wasn't going to happen. Sabu felt like it wasn't going to happen. And it did happen in a short period of time. And we could be sitting months from now talking about, wow, Punk finally came back and we got to experience that memorable moment. And like him, hate him, love him, whatever, CM Punk deserves to be back in the storytelling. And this gave me hope with the Sabu stuff. That makes sense. I tied it all together in my brain.
100%, man. And I love that. I love that how it resonates from 95 till now, and you could really tie it all together with everything in pro wrestling in general. Never say never. This was the beginning of the never say nevers, and it was really fucking poetic, man. It was great. I loved every bit of it.
Yeah, and just to make it clear, I'm still my stance on the Punk stuff is I don't like what he did with the press conference, but I do think there's a lot of story to be told. Similar to probably at the time, I wouldn't have been happy that Sabu no showed an ECW event that I went to.
Yeah.
So at the time, but I think people will look past it if you're able to get the stuff in the ring and put your differences aside. And time does heal all wounds. It really does.
It does. I'm excited for it.
All right, so let's close the tab. Get ready for the week that is in the tavern next week. Talk about Wrestling Tonight, talk about Fig Night, talk about everything coming up. And of course, guys, stay tuned. 5 minutes from now, Black Flash Jordan Collins will be visiting the tavern. Myself will be having a conversation with him and talking all things Remarkable Wrestling, talking about his career, talking about Japanese wrestling. He's a huge All Japan fan. His inspirations in the ring, Minoru Suzuki, Parasau, Tiger Man, you name it. We had a conversation about it. Jordan Collins, a young up-and-coming wrestler, 19 years old, but uber talented. So let's close the tab. Let's get into it. All right. As the lights come on the bar, Mike Belcaster, tell us what to expect in the upcoming week for the tavern. Hype stuff up. Do you guys have anything planned for Fig Night coming up next week?
Hell yeah. If you guys missed out this week's Fig Night, it was fantastic. We did our top 5 predictions. Me and Tom each broke down 5 predictions we hope to see in the figure community for wrestling. We had some really interesting picks. We've went and reviewed our picks from last year to see how they matched up and who was right and who was wrong. Tom kind of won, which I'm a little salty about, but we'll talk about that another time, that motherfucker. But yes, next week's Fig Night's going to be great. I think we're going to tie it in with the Rumble somehow. We get the Royal Rumble next week. It's going to be awesome. Very somber week here at the tavern. Again, I can't echo that enough. My thoughts are with, Jay Briscoe's family, Mark Briscoe, everybody there, the Ring of Honor family. It was shocking to us as it was to everybody else. I mean, Tom told me right after we got off the air for Fig Night, it took my breath away. And my thoughts are with all of his friends and family. We thank you for the many, many years of entertainment. And I will forever be in debt for the last year we had, because it was so impactful for not only myself, but the Turnbuckle Tavern in general. So look forward to some good shit.
Very well said, guys. And you guys can catch Wrestling Tonight on Monday, breaking down all the news stories. Trad now will definitely be talking about Jay Briscoe and his legacy, other wrestling news, catch you up for the week, go over the results, things like that. Next week, we're going to be coming back to the final episode of season 2 of Shot Nostalgia, Holiday Hell, December to Dismember, next Friday. For the next couple of Fridays following this, I have a lot of people coming on Visit the Tavern, so stay tuned. Sam Hain will be joining me following Shot Nostalgia next week. I have a whole bunch of guys lined up, so stay tuned to @ACEFIELD Retro to get the updates on who's coming up. But those will be dropping, I believe, on Wednesday mornings now on audio, and then video is going to be on Friday. If you're an audio person, they are going to be dropping in different spots. I know some of you guys are waiting for the Ocido drop to find, but you can also find it on the ACEFIELD Retro channel. It's on both spots. But I appreciate the support, everybody, and that's all we got for you. Paul Heyman's in my ear, but we're not going to do that gimmick tonight. All I'm going to say is rest in power, Jay Briscoe.